Hello, everybody. Welcome to New and Dangerous Opinions, brought to you by the Providence Post, providencepost.com. I'm your host, Derek Peterson. Today is May 23rd, the year of our Lord 2026. And we're going to be joined speaking with Johnny Vedmore. Johnny is one of the top researchers in the world on the Epstein and its many tentacles, stretching all across the world and into all sorts of different industries and intelligence and military and everything. And given many years of his life and time and energy into all of this with very little personal rewards, as is often the case, sadly, with most of these sorts of folks that are willing to give themselves in order to help others. Johnny, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for a lovely intro there, Derek. I'm happy to be here. It's been a very sunny and beautiful day in Cardiff, and first day really entering into summer. So I'm in good mood and I'm ready to talk whatever you want to talk
Excellent.
about.
Let's start just, I was so curious to hear how folks like yourself get into these sorts of things, what drove them to be exposed these things at, like I said, very little reward and a lot of risk to yourself, just for the sake of others, trying to help others. What brought you into this world?
Well, that's a hard one because I mean it's a long story, I suppose, and
We have
I
time.
think I think that I got every story starts with a moment where you get that trauma that shakes up your life and makes you say, I've got to do something that makes me happy, and I've got to do something that's important to me, and I've got to stop living all the different lies that we live when we're children and we're young. And I had lots of trauma throughout my life. I had quite an abusive family life. There was a lot of violence around the home. I got groomed when I was young, between the ages of 9 and 11, by a very horrible human being. And I went through a system of like a court system, giving evidence, etc. And I also felt very guilty because there was another child. I had been like 9, 10, 11 when that had happened, but he had also abused a 3-year-old, and they told me that at the time, and that kind of like left me always kind of the feeling I come to accept is that you're trying to protect someone who has grown up since, and you can't actually protect, that's how human
Mhm.
psychology works, and once you're hooked on something, you don't come off it. So I kind of felt sad all through my life. I kept doing things like in hotels and stuff, and I've been a musician all my life, as well. And I've done a lot of different roles, but I knew deep down that I was missing something, that I needed to do something, and I ended up taking, I got to be honest, a mushroom hiatus, Welsh magic mushrooms. When I got down to the bottom, and I was just like, I want to end it all. I just kind of said, okay, well, if I'm gonna be that sad, that at the end of the final tether, I may as well just try and reform myself in some other way. And so I did a lot of not partying or anything, meditating, thinking, considering the lilies, trying to like face all of the problems that I had in my life. And eventually I came to terms with the idea of, I think it took me a long time, but I suppose it was my idea of what an almighty would be. And that's a complicated thing. I mean, we could get it digging into the weeds.
Mhm.
Everybody can have a different view on that, but I do feel that I got given I would say like the message that everything is a wave, and you're either on the wave and get on the wave and do what you're meant to do in life, or you stay fighting against the wave and you drown every single time over and over again in life. So you've got a choice. You either keep drowning, like I had been drowning throughout my whole life in loads of different ways, or you let the wave take you and you let it show you the path yourself. And you can call that whatever you like. You can call that whatever you like, but the wave has like a moral and ethical factor to it. You're giving over yourself to something where you're like, okay, I've got to believe that if I do good, that there is a karmic quality to the universe and to my belief and to my life and to my existence, that there is something that says that if I do good, then I will get good back in return. So I realized coming out the other side, I did 3 months hiatus. I did a lot of work on myself, talking to myself, especially writing a letter to myself when I was the me that got groomed and the me that went through that trauma, and that was one of the hardest things. I mean, I had avoided it for so long. It was something that I knew I had to do, and that that really, I came out the other side saying, I am definitely a journalist. I'd already been researching stuff. I'd already realized that I knew things that other people didn't know. And then I went and looked online and discovered that no one knew it and they weren't telling anybody. And that kind of like, there was a barrel rolling effect to that. I thought, how am I going to do this? If I'm going to start writing and do something, I come out of the other side saying of this mushroom hiatus with the idea, okay, I was on a lot of drugs before. I was a drug addict. I was a musician living with a band, up to morphine and 10 other drugs at a time. It was like, if I'm going to come away from all of that, change my life and reform it completely, I've got to understand what the structure of that would be. And because I've been writing songs for so long, I've been writing, songs have an intro, they have a verse, chorus, you have like a middle eight and a solo, and then you have like a chorusy bit and then an outro. And that's how I kind of had always written my songs. And I thought, well, I'll kind of transfer that feeling over to article form. I'll just do something very basic. What I'll do is, I was very worried about the idea of objectivity, because I thought I would go straight out there and I would say a load of things. And I felt very sensitive to people saying, oh, you're on this side or you're on that side, because I wanted myself to go on a journey where I started off with the idea that I don't know. Not that I know already and I'm telling everybody else, but that I don't know and I want to know all of the information and put all of the information in a row. And I found this very simple technique. It's the most basic technique of journalism. I would implore any young journalist to just follow this. It's really simple. Take all of the information you can find, all of the facts, all of the data, all of the archives, all of the information about every single part of the issue you are studying, and then you put it in chronological order, and the story just tells itself. You don't need to add anything to it. At the end of it, you will always be surprised by the end result, and the story will not look like how you first expected it to be. And so I mean, doing that means that what I do is I go on a constant voyage of discovery, you could say. I'm constantly learning myself, because I'm not believing that I know from the start. I don't take a story and then look for an angle. I don't find all of that information and then look for the best way to kind of tell part of the story so it fits my purposes. I have no reason to do that. What I want to do is find out what's really going on. And once you go back into history as well, I've got a really, I got a special sort of, I've had a special childhood in a way, because I was in a thing which was a 17th century reenactment society of 8,000 people with cannons and muskets and pikes, and every weekend we'd be in a different place around the UK on campsites with castles for the whole weekend, and there would be beer tents and a whole new family that was around me all of the time, you know. So I had like this experience of history where it was indulgent. My dad was a commanding officer of Colonel John Birch's regiment of foot, and that regiment was 250 people who had some form of allegiance to a regiment, to my father, to all of this, and played out that allegiance on the battlefields and in the events and at the different recruiting drives that we did. So, I mean, I got to see history within it. I felt like I lived it quite a lot, you know, on authentic campsites, feeling what history was like. And when I go when I research things, I go back further than anyone would go back. Most people go back to the subject, go back to their formative years, and then you go from there. I go back to a few generations, see what the families were like, and then I work my way forward and I see what I find once I build a bigger picture, because it's only once you see what dad's mate did over here that helped so and so become big over here. Do you understand how this affected that? For instance,
Right.
Nahum Goldman, one of the creators, founding fathers of Israel, one of the heads of the World Zionist Organization, how is he related to Henry Kissinger? I mean, you wouldn't find necessarily, you may find them at events the same, but he's finding a link is hard. But if you study Nahum Goldman and you study Henry Kissinger, you find Guido Goldman, who's the son of Nahum Goldman, who's Henry Kissinger's best friend, and helps Henry Kissinger and him set up the German Marshall Fund of the United States in Harvard, which basically is funded by the Germans to cause non-governmental organizations to cause the fall of the Soviet Union, etc. It's one of the non-governmental projects projects that are running out of Harvard that's intelligence linked, but there's also a lot more to that, because there's leadership programs that come out of the German Marshall Fund so that they can put their leaders in appropriate positions of power whenever they do these sort of non-governmental coups with these people. But you only know the links between Guido Goldman, Nahum Goldman, and Henry Kissinger if you study the fine details of all of their life. If I just studied Henry Kissinger and Guido Goldman, maybe I would miss out that Nahum Goldman is one of the most important people in the founding of Israel.
Interesting. Thanks for that. That's really good background. It's always the case, it seems like, I've spoken to a lot of folks over the years, doing what they can to fight and help protect people and bring justice to these criminals that are doing terrible things, all sorts of terrible things. And almost in every case, it's similar to your testimony, where they went through trauma. They kind of had this, when people go through trauma, I think they have one of two ways to go in life. They either want to protect the people that 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 you know that could potentially fall victim like they were, from other people that were the ones that terrorized them, or they side with it and give into it. And as is the case, like with people, I think, like with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Peter Thiel and pretty much all of tech, all the tech bros all fall in the same category, or they're just weak men that had pretty simple lives that are just easily to compromise, that were bullied in high school or stuffed in lockers, and they want to be the bully now because it makes them feel good. Other people, very few of them, like yourself, choose to side with the ones that are getting stuffed in the lockers and try to protect them and going into the future.
It,
And
it
uh
I gotta say about the big tech bros and that description, I do kind of think that's probably semi accurate. But these guys kind of think differently than they think more like Spock than they do like humans, you know? They're much more, they see people as commodities very early on. So they would have had management and coping strategies through while during that period where they were getting locked in the lockers and etc. They would have had ways to cope with that. But afterwards, when they were let off the leash, the people in power they come through the university systems, and the people in power saw the fact that they had an emotional detachment that suits what the
yeah, that's
behavioral
true.
insight units call the econ.
Hmm.
Just to say quickly, nudge units, behavioral insight teams, Richard Thaler, Cass Sunstein, they grandfathers of the nudge units, which are like using psychology to nudge people's behavior without them knowing. And it is, I did an article about Elon Musk being trained for a Jeffrey Epstein funded program, Edge, by Richard Thaler himself, on the nudge units. They really know how to make people do things, because they look at they separate people into two different categories. They separate them into humans, which they describe as like Homer Simpson, and they separate them up as Mr. Spock. Econs, the kind of like rational sort of like everybody eats a certain amount, does a certain amount, does a certain amount of steps, knows exactly what they're going to do. No, you know when they're going to wake up. They want certainty and they believe in certainty. But the econs know that they can make money off the humans. The humans, if you ask a human how to get to the, this is one of Richard Thaler's examples. If you ask a human how to get to the museum, he'll tell you how to get to the museum. If you ask an econ, he'll think, how can I make money from this?
Exactly.
And then they will use you in whichever way they want. These guys are the econs. These are the guys who they see a rube straight away, and a rube for them is a human being. So they're
Right.
really detached from humanity in many ways.
But I think it is a coping mechanism, like you said, because the ones and from that, with that coping mechanism, they become detached into what you're talking about, because the alternative is to basically have some sort of a breakdown, whatever you want to call it, nervous breakdown, or bottoming out, or whatever you want to call it. And when I hear people say that they've, that's why I respect people that have had nervous breakdowns. If you haven't had a nervous breakdown, or whatever you want to call it, you're not really trying in this world, I don't think, right? You're not. It's like learning how to ski. If you go the whole day, your first day of skiing, and don't fall down, you're not really trying, right? If someone brags about, I've never had a nervous breakdown, and I'm like, well, put your skis together and point downhill and report back, right? And you're going to fall down. These people that don't have the guts to fall down because people that hold on to truth and want to seek righteous things, eventually they're going to have those situations in their life where they're just fighting and fighting and won't give in no matter what. And these ones that cope are the ones that are escaping that scenario, and they become broken, I think, like what you're talking about there with these heartless people that probably become
Yeah.
reprobate.
I think we can also see there's examples in certain people here where there's a dynamic at play where there is some sort of something happening in the home. In Elon Musk's case, there's a lot of accusations surrounding his father. He's even said that his father's a terrible person, and it looks like there is credible allegations there. So that would say that even if Elon Musk himself wasn't abused per se, if he knows of abuse and he has that fear, that is something that primes somebody like that to be a certain way or another way. Now, if he's an empathic person, and he has like a human, much more human quality than, or humane quality, then he's much more likely to end up being caring about people. But if he's the other way, if he's a bit narcissistic, a bit self-centered, a bit not interested in anybody else and just interested in surviving, likelihood he'll find a load of coping strategies that will let him accept that if he does negative things, the ethics and morals behind it don't really matter as long as he's
Right.
protected. And over time, I mean, any addiction
Exactly.
to
Right.
that, it just expands out. Yeah.
It's one step, just covering up some abuse of another kid or something like that. I remember from my own personal experiences, I just turned into somebody that was very dangerous and very angry. And when I see people mistreating other people, I was always very protective of animals and kids and women and things like that. And that's how
I still am. I'm a bit. I gotta say that, like, sometimes I'm a bit over the top about stuff, and people don't
I
quite
am too.
understand it. And like, just it just does not have to be any ambiguity around certain
Exactly.
things. And I
Right.
keep arguing that take away the ambiguity. There's a lot of people who they don't understand what danger looks like until they've made the same mistake 100 times. And that's
Mhm.
fine, that's fine. But when it comes to things like, and this is one of the main things, I mean, I've been talking a lot about this recently. Child safeguarding should be first and foremost. It should be paramount. It's really simple. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Is, you implement certain child safeguarding methods in certain arenas, and it stops certain people from taking advantage. And yet, I know that in 10 years' time, 15 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, we'll see more and more inquiries about how no one followed the right child safeguarding procedures. No one
Right.
cared about it. Because as soon as you start seeing, you question it, you say, there is an abuser within that midst, there in your midst. They're not interested. They all close down. They all close ranks. I'm currently going through a situation where one organization, I just ended up contacting nearly everybody at the organization and saying, listen, at some point, you're going to have a part to play in this. And when that time comes, you're either going to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and you should choose to do the right thing. And that's where I think that was probably the best thing to do within that organization. Just each one personalized message saying, hey, make the right decision at the right time, because the time will come. But people don't think about it. They don't think anybody's watching. They don't think anybody's waiting. They don't think that it'll be resolved. And they think if they speak out, they'll be the ones who lose out.
Suffer. Right.
That's
Yeah,
a
they do.
selfish.
They do. They are very selfish. Most people's thought process just involves how it affects them and theirs, and they can't see beyond that for the sake of anyone else. And it happens everywhere. I mean, I come from, you know, after I went through my life experiences, I became a born again Christian, and I got involved with what's known as the Independent Fundamental Baptist group, which is not a denomination per se. It's more of like a group of people that have similar doctrines, but it's headed up by these narcissistic weirdos and kind of broken up into these factions. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, there's some despicable people doing some despicable things. And we even in that Christian world, fundamentalist Christian world, I've exposed it early on, and it horrified me because I'd come from a very dark world. And then I'm like, what is going on here? And so it really made me angry. And I would go after these guys. And I've seen them cover up exactly the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about and in their networks. And if you talk about it, if you expose it or expose them and their friends, I mean, there's been situations where the pastor and the entire deacon board were all involved in this stuff, all the leaders in the church, in a fundamentalist Baptist church, right?
Mm.
And they were actually helping this pastor transport kids, right?
I, I
And
I'm
it's
I'm not
unbelievable.
shocked at all, because
Yep.
I in December I got chased around by members of the Vatican on behalf of an Epstein associate, and it was
Hmm.
one in Rome, and it was one of the most bizarre. They brought me over themselves, told me a load of nonsense, and then tried to intimidate me, and then tried to buy publishing rights for any book I write about this woman. It was impossible to even imagine how their plan looked on paper. They're just sometimes it just becomes like the people you think are supposed to be the most ethical are
Right.
really
The
the
worst.
worst, and they're the
Right.
worst criminals as well. They're not very good at
Yep.
what they try and do. They're not even very good at their what they're trying to the crime they're trying to commit.
Yeah, there is something to that. I mean, I just did a video on North Korea, and you know, the first leader of modern day North Korea, who was installed by Stalin, was raised in a very good Christian home. North Korea, Pyongyang, was the Jerusalem of the East. It was a very Christian nation ruled by Christians at that time in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and then it got taken over or divided up, and the guy who dismantled Christianity and murdered every Christian in the country basically was raised in a Christian home. The guy who installed him, Stalin, was raised in a Christian home, went to Bible college, and was studying in seminary to become a Orthodox priest. And then he
Bible
went on to
college
murder
will make
50
you
million Christians.
angry. I
I
tell you.
went. I
Yeah.
went. I went.
I mean, it make
And
you angry, man, you know.
oh my goodness, the hypocrisy. And I was, when you're a sincere guy and you're just like, what in the they'll never admit it. These Christians, it's like when you catch them in something, even something small, like a financial thing, they never admit it. They will
It's quite
resist
it's
and they'll attack. It's
disappointed.
it's infuriating.
Yeah, I see it in loads of different ways. I was filming. I was actually I had filmed a Welsh male voice choir singing outside a church called the Tabernacle in the centre of Cardiff, and the building's a really old building. It was well, really old. It was 1821, I think it was made and then rebuilt in about 1865. Beautiful building, really interesting architecture and design because it kind of like went across the two worlds. It was like a 60s
Mhm.
version of a 20s place. And there was a choir singing with the open doors when I arrived the second time just to do a little bit of extra recording. And I went to go in and I went to walk in and they come up and they closed the door on me. They made sure that they knew I was not welcome as well. They gave me that look, you know, and I was like,
Really?
church,
Interesting.
the place where you're definitely not welcome.
Yeah, that's
It's
sad.
just the way it
That's
is.
not
Yeah,
the
but it's
way it should be.
just the way it is. Just the way it is.
It's sad. There's good people. I've met very few of them. The thing they almost all have in common is they're poor and almost unknown and
Yeah.
often very, very persecuted. Is if someone's in this world, if someone's a billionaire, then they're probably doing something wrong,
Yeah,
is the
yeah,
bottom
yeah.
line. And
Be nice to
speaking
have a
of
nice
which,
big swimming pool.
yeah, it would. But, you know, the rewards don't come in this world, I think. But um, so yeah, that's great stuff. I guess we can get into what I'd like to try to get in. I know the Epstein network is could be 100 hours of conversation. How can we narrow it down, like to get into more of the technocracy that they're trying to establish, cover some of the figures, modern day ones especially, that were involved, and
Oh,
kind
I
of get
like
into
that.
this technocracy? Is that
So the
first of all, where did Epstein start from? Let's just do the basics. Like, who is he? Where did he come from? How did this all start?
so
A
it
lot of
seems
people
like
don't even get it.
yeah, it seems like Epstein's a bit of an anomaly at the start. You know, to most people, he's not very good in academia. He's not very bright. This is the story that's been said, but I think there's an actual real story where he's probably noted as being through the roof in some parts of his abilities, and someone somewhere said, "Okay, that's the person we need on this job in particular." Because what it seems like to me when I research all of it is that he got recruited by the CIA probably right at the end of the late 70s, and by the 80s he's helping with the funding streams for Iran Contra. And this is very much, this will be the theme throughout all of his life. He's constantly working within the financial system, often in New York itself, and he is helping move deep state dark money, CIA money, probably tier one military organization money. I was say for a lot of the time when I first started investigating Epstein, I felt that the court, everybody had kind of agreed that he was the Mossad, and that it was this idea was given that he was somehow like a puppet master for the Israelis, and he's puppeteering these poor innocent CIA Americans to do whatever they want, and it's against the best interest of America, etc. But in actual fact, by this time, there's a mutualistic, symbiotic relationship between America and Israel. There's no difference between them. Lots of people like to characterize Israel's relationship as purely parasitical, but America, its 51st state really is Israel. So they have lots of
Capital.
ties. that yeah, maybe. I mean, the capital will change, just say that.
Yeah.
But I think what Epstein did really well was funding large operations. And through the 80s he's working different, clearly, like gun running, just raising money and collateral, a lot of things attached to Iran Contra. And on the other side, his mate later on, Bill Clinton, is on the Contra side, helping seeing funding streams through Mena, Arkansas, when he's governor there. So there's both sides, they're kind of combined in the same area. And there's some people who, like, for instance, Stanley Pottinger, who I definitely claim is CIA, and his business partner, Bradley Edwards, also claims he's CIA. Stanley Pottinger is one of Epstein's victims' lawyer. He admitted that during that period when Epstein's funding the running of guns and organizing the running of guns in Iran Contra, Stanley Pottinger is sharing an office with him, working on the same project. Stanley Pottinger is the one who goes to the CIA with his business partner Cyrus Hashemi and says, hey, there's this really good opportunity here that we could get my best friend George H.W. Bush into office if we do. And then he describes Iran Contra. And later on in 1984, I think it was a federal organization that's kind of like the FBI, but not the FBI. I can't remember which one it was. Had been wiretapping Stanley Pottinger and Cyrus Hashemi's phones, and they had discovered over the past 4 years the Iran Contra plot, and that led to the October Surprise Task Force in the early 90s eventually. But during that mid 80s period, a lot of these people who had been working on that, once that all came out, they kind of went in underground in a lot of ways, and they had to learn how to do things a little bit differently. And around that time is where you see the ties between, this is like, say, 1987 time. You're seeing Les Wexner enter onto the New York scene. He's been an Ohio-based businessman. He's got a lot of money. He's extremely linked in with the Zionist groups, and Jewish influencing on the ground in general in loads of different areas, and coordinating influence to lift up the Jewish voice in America in ways that made them just impossible not to hear. He was a very talented man, and he comes into New York around that time because they all have to go and bend their knee for a couple of years to the guys in New York, whoever they may be. I think Epstein always had a base in New York and always revolved around New York in many ways. But afterwards, they could go away for a bit. I mean, Epstein was on the islands, was mainly in Palm Beach and etc. They didn't have to be in New York all the time, but they have to go there and bend a knee a little bit. Wexner was only in New York for a couple of years doing a few different things, but in this time, the Jewish lobby is all around there. Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell come into the American scene at that time as well. And all of these guys will know each other very, very, very well. And then the whole operation changes. So at that time, I'd say from his recruitment in the late 70s till the late 80s, he is specifically working for the CIA alongside their Israeli partners. And then I think he's given the job of working with Israel to a much closer level when George H.W. Bush gets into power, because George H.W. Bush offers them extra protection because he's part of where this operation originally come from. The operation to recruit people like Epstein and stuff, I think that came through the period while George H.W. Bush was the head of the CIA, and a lot of these guys were enacting George H.W. Bush's wider plan in many ways, and that was partially to destroy the left of politics, which is where Bill Clinton comes in. And then there's a difference because that's a really hard thing to describe quickly, but I'm going to try and do it because I want to.
Let me jump back. Let me jump back real quick to the New York thing. So they're bending the knee to these New York bankers, right? Most of those folks, I'm sure, are probably of the Jewish persuasion, without sounding too anti-Semitic. Um, so they're Jews, and if they're bending the knee to them, right, they're probably also connected to Israel already at that time, don't you
Yeah,
think? Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
So
So they
so
were. So even though he wasn't directly working for Mossad, he was basically still working for Israel slash Mossad, even before they officially got him on board to a
yeah,
large degree.
I think
I think of Israel as more of a capital, like for evil, right? So I think a lot of this is a spiritual thing, and these guys all kind of think of it as their Mecca, or whatever you want to call it, as the evil, the Moloch worship, or whatever you want to call it. And Israel's kind of it. And so they're all kind of serving, even the ones in the CIA are part of this evil. And they're all kind of, that's why they all seem to be aligned to this one belief system, I think,
so
or this one path. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
so this is all really, a lot of this is because of their version of Zionism and what Zionism means. And this is I mean, the Moshayak is a really important part. The return of the Moshayak is
Hmm.
signaled through certain things. You know, the person who is the Moshayak will only be confirmed as the Moshayak if he calls back all the Israelites to Israel, to Greater Israel. By that point, if he's of the line of David, if he rebuilds the third temple, and he lives completely and utterly strictly by the Torah. Those are the things that will need to happen to make sure that Jews believe. As soon as those things are done, that person who's done it is the Moshayak, no doubt about it. And then what will happen, the post period of the Moshayak, when the Moshayak rules, he will rule over all of the kingdoms of the world, all the nations that aren't Jews, with wisdom and peace, is what they say. But
Noahide laws.
really,
Hmm.
it's Goyim slaves. And
Exactly.
the extremists of this, so the Jeffrey Epsteins and Leslie Wexners, who believe
And Kushner's.
in making this
Yep.
happen, they believe that they will be putting these like Americans who work with them, etc. They will be in charge of America. All the Jews will be going back to Israel to hang
Mm.
out in all of this in Moshayak land. So the rest of the world has to be managed by these Goyim administrators, and really
Hmm.
that's what they already see people as. And so they have a very extreme, some of the language they use about non-Jews is clearly, shows that they're extremist racists who
Hmm.
have a belief of superiority that is given to them by their religion. And unfortunately, I mean, we're not allowed to talk about that. I would, if I was arguing with someone on someone who was like Israel Defense Force or something on a TV show, I would seriously want to be asking, do you believe in the return of the Moshiach, and do you believe that every single non-Jew is going to be ruled by the Jews? Because that's what we're accusing them of creating, and that's what their religion is. So
I
the
know.
two things, we're accusing them of creating what they say they want to create, and it's almost illegal, it's illicit to talk about it.
It's very odd to see Christians defending it when obviously the person they're talking about, these um, Jews, is the Antichrist. And all the Christians are like, we have to support them. We have to help Israel build. I'm like, what they're talking about is bringing in the Antichrist, right? And you want to help them? I don't think God approves, but You should check that.
Some of
You
them
should check
believe
those
it's a
sources.
digital antichrist, that the Moshiach will actually
A
be
lot of them
some
do,
form
yeah.
of AI form. And if they could sell that well enough, I mean, it doesn't matter whether it one day will come true or not. The worst people in society will trick as many people as they can to
Yep.
do their bidding. That's always been the way it is.
Or it could be an alien. They're pushing the aliens awful hard right
Oh,
now.
they
I
love
don't
it. They
expect.
love it. Mhm.
Anyway, sorry, I distracted you from that path you were on. I don't even remember where we were going. Do you remember?
So we were on talking about
Pottinger
entrance of
in the
Maxwell and
U.S., right?
etc. And
Yep.
these
Yep.
guys who are coming in, they bend in in New York, and that happens through 1987 to about 1990, 1991 to about the death of Robert Maxwell. To be honest, there
Mm-hmm.
is a one way of doing things. There's these new people coming into the New York scene being and I mean there's a 1989 photographs of the Malcolm Forbes party. It was one of his birthday parties a year or two before he died, and some of the pictures in there are just extraordinary. They were the top people in society, and Robert Maxwell and people were just being brought in, and they were dressing the part and they were loving it, and it was a whole new world about to be created. I think what was happening is that much earlier, and I'm talking about late 60s, early 70s, the American intelligence and the Israel intelligence merged. They'd already won most of the minor wars that they needed to merge, and they just merged. They became basically already globalist facing, you could say. They already believed, okay, we're going to take over everything and we're going to be in charge of everything, so let's just set up the infrastructure for doing that. And that's what they did. So what we see afterwards is the rise of what is like detached organizations like non-governmental organizations or non-governmental development organizations to create these things so that they can look like there's detachment, but really it's the intelligence, it's the CIA or the Mossad. They're all funding the same operations, and now it's all just a mishmash of everything. In the late
Mm-hmm.
80s, there seemed to be rhyme and reason to a few things, but things were about to change. They were going to have to be open about the Iran Contra thing was spiraling. The information was coming out from by 1992 when George H.W. Bush is just about to leave office. You've got the October Surprise Task Force on its way. So obviously that was coming, and they needed to have some form of look like they were having a reset. Now, at the same time, there's a new political system called third way politics, which will be eventually, and this is where we were heading towards the technocracy. So we're heading towards
Mm-hmm.
the understanding of technocracy. And during this period, you have to think about timing. The late 80s, the early 90s are the time when all of the big money people were investing in the future technologies that would make them billionaires, and they were placing their people into those positions of power. For instance, let's say David Shaw, one of the biggest hedge funds in New York and the New York Stock Exchange in the 90s, was where Jeff Bezos was vice president, and would go from there straight into Amazon. And his miner who worked with him at Shaw's, D. Shaw's hedge fund, and did a load of projects with him, would go on to open download.com. And so they were all about to make masses of money and implement their own leaders into the technocracy, and they already saw it coming. So they already investing in this period, and that's where New Labour come in. The New Democrats come in first. Bill Clinton, 1992 election, he says, we're no longer a left-wing party. We're now a third-way party, and we're a centrist party. Now, third-way politics, purges the left of the party, says left bad, whatever, they're anti-Semites, they're the nastiest people in the world, purge, purge, purge. In purging them, they become more attractive to parts of the right, voters from the right. And voters from the right, they get drawn in by the illusion, and that sees the right collapse eventually as well. And then in the middle, you've got this big globalist intelligence blob. Now, all of the solutions from the left and right of politics can't exist in this space. They leave holes because they're on the left or they're on the right, so you can't choose these things. Instead, what happens is austerity and war replace those things, and that's what Bill Clinton first implemented. At the same time, all of the new Labour elite, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Yvette Cooper, Ed Balls, Ed Miliband, all of the big guys who will eventually make Tony Blair's cabinet in the UK are all learning third way politics and learning Clinton style of politics in 1992 and 1993. Ed Balls is at Harvard during the one period, learning from Robert Reich and Larry Summers. 1993, at the same time this is all happening, Epstein's also hanging in exactly these same circles, going to the White House. He'll be going in there 17 times. So this is a start of an operation. It's an operation to train the next generation of leaders. And that's what Epstein's being given. He's being given the job of training the future leaders of the technocracy. That's what I at least believe. And he does so with the idea of compromise. In 1992, 1993, he starts setting up his island, his other places where he starts building up this infrastructure that will lead to Lolita Express flying all the way around the place, bringing all of these people here and there. Child trafficking operation suddenly begins. At first they're making mistakes all over the place, but Ghislaine Maxwell is very good at this, almost like she's done it before. And there is rumors. I am following an investigation in the UK to her potentially have been grooming for the same sort of parties that Epstein would have in Britain as well beforehand for somebody else. But I can't talk about that at the moment, partially because of a high court order. But there's during that period, they're making a new infrastructure, and it's going to be an infrastructure partly of compromise, but it's compromise by association mostly. You don't need to get videos of people with people or photographs. These people get on the party boat, and they know if they try and get off the party boat, they are going to be done. Something's going to happen to them. They know the power that these people have. They see it. And so if they get on, they can just never get off the party boat.
Interesting. So let me back up for 1 second. So that's an interesting take, and I never really considered it like the way you just expressed it, of Epstein's role. So he wasn't, I guess he also probably recruited to some degree, but someone else, I guess, was recruiting, and he's more of an HR person that's bringing these people into the company and kind of managing them and their complaints and things like that and their needs. And so he's more of an HR, if you're looking at like a corporate structure, he's not really the recruiter. I work as a recruiter. He's more of an HR person bringing people in into the company. That's a very interesting way to look at it. And he's doing that through different means, like you said, either just compromise or financial incentives or threats or whatever. Interesting. To train all these people, a network.
If I was to posit what I've just posited, it should lead to something that looks like the leaders of the technocracy being trained by Epstein. So if it does, if you follow it. So by 1997, 1998, he is getting heavily involved in John Brockman's, what was the Reality Club, and had been rebranded around this time as the Edge Foundation and edge.org. And edge.org would take some of the core members of the reality club, which would be in a small group of academics meeting in New York in like trendy jazz cafes or whatever. Richard Dawkins would be there, Daniel Dennett, a few others, Isaac Asimov was be hanging around there. You know, there was a few different people who were trying to imagine a future, and they're trying to imagine the technocracy. The D.E. Shaw itself, the hedge fund that was also in, that I talked about, that Bezos came through, that was also in New York during this period. This was also seen as a different style of leadership program for choosing the leaders of the technocracy. So they were looking for these leaders, but they were also looking for what the future looked like, and that really is partially what the Reality Club and eventually Edge.org would offer. Now, in 1998, 1999, if you see who's turning up to Edge.org, you got Rupert Murdoch's hanging in the house, Jeffrey Epstein's hanging around, Dawkins and a lot of others are hanging around. It's the boys, it's the science guys, and they're trying to work out what the future looks like. They want to know synthetic genomics. They want to know transhumanism, of course. They want to know what viruses look like. They want to know what political systems looks like. In fact, Giddens, who created third wave politics, does a course within Edge to teach these people about it. And the people who are taking part in Edge.org, who are sitting down around the table, are some of the most important people who eventually take over the technocracy. So I want to go to the master classes. There was Edge was to train leadership groups, and if you get to 2008 and 2009, those are two examples of Edge masterclass courses. 2008's was run by Richard Thaler, the guy who invented nudge units and behavioral insight, how to change people's behavior surreptitiously in this course included by using social media. And the people who were in the room for it was a 6-day course, so it's like a short course. The people in the room on some of these days were Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Salah Kamangu was the deputy head of YouTube at the time. Evan Williams was the head of Twitter at the time. And they were teaching how to for instance, one day was called the psychology of scarcity. It was how to use poverty against people and make their decisions different while using social networks. So they're teaching. This is an Epstein funded program. By the late 90s, Epstein was just funding Edge and putting in loads of money. In actual fact, during that year is the time when Epstein was in prison. And the following year's course, the 2009 masterclass, which was funded by Epstein, was also funded by Elon Musk. It was a joint course that was held at SpaceX. And round there, they had two of the heads of synthetic genomics to talk about what is essentially transhumanism. So what they were doing is they were teaching the future heads of social media how to use choice architecture to manipulate people through social media. And then the next year they're discussing how they're going to change their cells in a designer way to be more superior. And some of the things they say is like, oh, let's not worry about the risks and stuff. And they just go in full force. They know they've got us to experiment on, and they are going to experiment on us. And if you follow the Edge courses, these are all funded by Epstein, and they literally train the top people in our society right now, all of them, on how to do what they're doing right now. So he was shaping our reality. They were going through what the future looks like. And he was also funding any operations and going to the banks, working with Deutsche Bank or JP Morgan to fund lots of black operations, probably that help fund all of these different ideas of the future, make them so. Or at least the ideas they already know are going to be made so, they will co-opt them and they will own them before anybody else gets there. One of the people who was heavily involved, took most of the pictures in the Edge Foundation, was Nathan Myhrvold, who was constantly taking patents off people and stealing patents off people for stuff. And that was part of what he did. His company just went around looking to steal high value patents off people by rewording a couple of lines in the patent or not. Really totally evil man. All of these men were building our society. Every single person who you think is your friend was already part of the Edge Foundation, and they're all being trained on this. Even people like Naomi Wolf is in there. Eric Weinstein and his brother Brett Weinstein are in there. And people can say, oh, well, it was just an academic foundation, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it was an academic foundation where they all knew they were being funded by someone who, and this is a kicker, that one that was the masterclass in 2009 in synthetic genomics was at SpaceX and happened a day and a half after Epstein was released for what he did to a child. And none of those people, even though that was being funded by Epstein, none of those people even had a slight second thought about turning up to that. They know they can get away with murder. And I describe it in one of the songs I've written, sell children pie, pie, pie. They do not care. They will sell their own children for a piece of that pie.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. How do you think they recruit? I mean, they seem to recruit from I mean, all the names, a lot of the names you just mentioned, Naomi Wolf and the other there were,
Universities,
yeah,
mostly
from
universities, mostly,
universities.
yeah, Harvard, Yale, Stanford.
Stanford seems to be a big one for Teal.
Especially for technocracy, Stanford is
Right.
is brilliant for the tech. I mean, it's the big guys.
These incubators also, I think they use these incubators. Like, what's that name of that incubator that Teal used to run or started before Founders Fund? It's a famous one in San Francisco. I can't think of the name of it. It's very popular. That's how, like, people like Andrew Torba, who started Gab, that's where he came through there. Actually, he started with Teal in high school. He was writing Teal letters in high school.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've noticed that's common between all these people is they seem to really like to get philosophy degrees, because I think it teaches them to not have any black or white in their life, right? And
Yeah, there's an element of that. I think people have to accept, and from my research, I mean, I did an article called Thiel and Schwab, nuclear apartheid, and it was about how Klaus Thiel, Peter Thiel's father, and Klaus Schwab were both in South Africa, working on different parts of this illegal apartheid era South African atomic nuclear bomb program. So Klaus Schwab was secretly selling weapons through his father's old Nazi model company, Escher Weiss, which he had just merged into Schulze Escher Weiss and would be a later Schulze, and they were selling nuclear weapons technology to them. He had just come out of a course in Harvard called Kissinger's International Seminar, where leaders of the New World were put to task straight away, and his first task was to sell nuclear weapons technology on behalf of the American establishment, really, via a German channel to the South African apartheid regime. Of course, Kissinger believed in a certain level of nuclear proliferation, so him and his guy Herman Kahn would have that, mutually assured destruction dynamic going on all over the world, and that's what they saw as important during that period. At the same time, Klaus Thiel, Peter Thiel's father, and Peter Thiel is living in Swakopmund in now Namibia, was then Southwest Africa, is growing up as a child in this environment. His father is sending black men, women, and children down a uranium mine with little to no protection at all. They were slaves, apartheid era slaves. They were ingesting uranium. They were taking it home to their families. It is a genocide that no one has ever discussed or properly acknowledged. The different languages at the time in the region said the mines are eating us. That's Peter Thiel's father, and really they were from Germany. It was very much like they looked. Swakopmund was a place where they were still doing the Hitler salute. They were still completely like flying the Nazi swastika when Peter Thiel's growing up. So he's growing up in Nazism, still existing in this like parallel world that's almost like a sci-fi novel where his father is murdering black people by sending them down a uranium mine with no protection, and he's never going to be held to account for anything. So what's Peter Thiel going to do? He's going to be brought up to already have this idea that he's above people, but for some reason, and this has got to be he was probably gifted program or something like this, because in when he goes to Stanford, Irving Kristol has him open up the Stanford Review and funds the Stanford Review nearly straight away. Irving Kristol, the grandfather of neoconservatism, is the first person to back Thiel, and that seems like okay, that must have gone through some sort of training program, and that must mean that he's recognized for some form of ability. I would say it's got to be mathematical ability, science, astrophysicians and stuff like that. Seems to get a lot of
obviously lack of character.
Yeah, lack of character, but also a bit of Nazi. I think he's a bit Nazi.
I think what happens with a lot of these Nazi guys, I've watched a lot of them and interacted with a lot of them. I'm very far right myself, obviously not a Nazi, but I think what these Nazis are just gay guys that are mad at themselves for being gay.
Well, it's a broad statement, but you're probably right.
I think I've seen these guys and I'm like, they're Nazis doing all this, saying all this Nazi stuff.
Embrace it.
They look like little twinks. And they look like little twinks. And I'm like, are you just trying to act tough? Do you think this is like a picture of masculinity? Is Nazism?
But it's also a domination thing. It's a dominate. That's
what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, as we were talking about earlier.
There's a suit like there's always. I think there's a lot of stuff that like straight guys have a hard time discussing, like daddy
issues.
Well, no, more like figures, positions, daddy, submissive slave, other. They project that out to the people they want to attract, and we don't quite understand what that means or how that works. So what we see, we try and attribute to other things, but in actual fact, they're playing a role that they love and other people love also, and so their group completely understands what the signals mean to each other, but for us, we're a bit confused by it all.
I think a lot of it too is just that they are. I'm just thinking of that guy Milo, right?
Oh God, Milo Yiannopoulos.
And he kept calling Daddy Trump, Daddy Trump, Daddy Trump, Daddy Trump, and I'm just like, there's a psychological thing going on here with these operations, with these broken men that are like this. And I think like all of these, I mean, look at Nick Fuentes. I just did an article on Nick Fuentes. He's protecting pedophiles, right? He had several that I exposed. This guy Ali Akbar, Alexander, who was molesting a bunch of 14, 15-year-old right-wing boys. They would come in, they wanted to be right-wing influencers, and he would groom them and rape them brutally in some cases. And this was going on.
Circles, man. It just keeps going around in circles over and over.
And Fuentes knew about this. It's still his best friend. And they were just grooming these young boys and promising them they were going to be the next Nick Fuentes if they just stuck with him and did their dirty work. And
that's definitely not how it works. But Nick Fuentes, he looks like that. Gotta say, he looks like he's enjoying it.
And everybody who follows him is kind of not that different than him. They're all pretty, you know, you know, these kids have all been stuffed in lockers in high school. These are not exactly like athletic kind of
Yeah, I
sorts
think I think
of
a lot
guys.
of this is their peak will pass, and one day they'll look as old as me and you do, and no one will love them anymore. So,
I don't think anyone does already is the problem with a
yeah,
lot
I
of
know.
them.
A lot of it's
The,
boosted. I mean, I know we probably agree with this
yes,
wholeheartedly that a lot of people like Nick Fuentes, the only reason why we think he's big is because they've made us think he's big. He's actually
right.
a nobody, and hardly anybody, at least hardly anybody of note actually listens or watches him. When people are talking about these people like Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, and stuff, they're talking about them in a way that's detached from actual information and actual
Hmm.
knowledge. So it's not like they can actually be taken seriously for even being like part of this. Some of it is just ridiculous. Some of it looks like the
Yeah.
CIA on TV to me. That's what it looks like.
It's all artificial. You're totally right. I've studied this stuff a lot myself over the many years, and I've exposed a lot of this online scams. I mean, Fuentes, his own lead tech guy who got disgruntled with him, um, came out and said that they had a times X multiplier on his video channel, right? So it would 5x all of his viewers, right?
Oh.
And in sites like Rumble, which is another Peter Thiel,
Ugh.
and the very masculine JD Vance um, owned project,
Those
um,
eyelashes though.
massive pump. The eyeliner, it's so weird.
Yeah,
Why would
what the hell?
who would
I
trust?
mean, it's
Never
I
trust a
think
man in eyeliner. That's my first rule.
I don't know. I
And
don't know. I'd never trust JD Vance if he pretends he's not in eyeliner. How about
here's the weirdest thing. Peter Thiel has a type, though. If you look at JD Vance and like guys like Andrew Torba, they're like the least masculine guys for like normal men to look at. They're like, that's not really a dude, you know. And but they look alike. They look awfully alike. And I think it's just like a gay guy's view of what a masculine man would look like.
that? Yeah,
And
I kind of agree with you there.
and
Uh,
it's like, oh, he's base looking. He looks like a lumberjack. And normal
But
guys
they
are like,
I mean,
no, he doesn't.
they got the feel right because obviously they connect with the younger, vacuous audience that they've created, and I think a lot of their platforms and a lot of if you actually look at the detail of their plans, you know, I'm saying that when I said about the 2008 masterclass in
Yeah.
behavioral
Let's get back to
insights
that.
that these
Yep.
guys went on, yeah, if you actually look at the evidence, you've got full minutes to the meetings, you've got all of the plans laid out, you've got videos, you've got audio. They don't hide it. They got article after article, and they explain the exact world we're seeing them create. And people don't really go and look at the evidence. Don't go to see what is actually happening. But if you did go and see what's actually happening, see that it does seem to be that these tech guys they've got the right idea of what is going to keep people distracted, how to divide people.
Right. In the
They
meantime,
use a
right.
couple of tropes, things like I mean divide and conquer, but a massive amount of
Culture
logical
wars.
fallacies
Right.
to play people off, and a lot of it is a creation of dialectic that no one can win. So I was talking to a friend the other day, and he was talking about his view on abortion. And I, you know, I understand. I understand the view, and however much I don't want to be shot as a messenger, I can tell you, anybody who thinks one way on abortion, there will be an argument that's almost as good on the other side that will be cause opposition, a dialectic opposition, arguments that are opposed to each other. That means you will have clash that can never be resolved, and they
Right.
look for things like that. So they're put. I mean, they're
I
things we
know.
should have conversations about. But what they do
Right.
is they look to keep us clashing over these things while they're quickly changing our world into their image. And their image is it is like, I mean, it's.
It's
I
evil.
I
Hell.
don't think it's right to say these guys are like like a gay person would think that guys should be like. I think this is what a devil would think is going to be
Yeah, maybe.
attractive to the world, because I don't think it's necessarily anything to do with sexuality. It's about dominance. Dominance includes a level of sexuality, including within the Epstein operation in general. There was a lot of that, the use of dominating other human beings. That's of course an element of it, but I think a lot of it is about dominating in rhetoric, dominating in rules, dominating in laws, dominating in infrastructure, dominating financially. All of it is about dominating, and then eventually dominating
Right.
freedom, taking
And
away freedom.
and good people, the last thing in the world they ever want to do is dominate anybody. And these people lust for it, like, which is
Yeah.
scary because usually if someone's working towards something and someone else doesn't want that, then the bad person usually gets that power. So so Epstein was very connected to all these tech bros, I guess, right? Thiel and Musk
Hmm.
and even Bezos. Um,
In
and so
multiple
they
ways.
set really.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've seen a little bit of stuff related to Thiel and Epstein. What else do you think was going on there in that relationship?
We can see so where I started off, and for when I first started off, I didn't know I was actually investigating Peter Thiel at that time, because I was investigating Jeffrey Epstein and his links to a woman called Nicole Youngkerman.
Hmm.
Nicole Youngkerman was an extremely interesting character. I've done a lot of work on her. No one was allowed to talk about her until the Department of Justice released the Epstein files, and she was mentioned 4,329 times or something. So then suddenly it's sanctioned. Everybody can talk about her. But she was an extremely powerful woman, and I had found it very, like, I had been alarmed that she had been invited into the Health Tech Advisory Board, the NHS. We got, like, of course, what is essentially a socialist healthcare system, but it's well thought of and heavily protected by the people. Um, we don't really want private healthcare in the UK. We'd pay for it in other ways, and it is probably more expensive, and they're being taken advantage of all the time. But still, we preferred to have it like that. And so, I was a little bit like, I want to make sure that I protect that. They had saved my life. I had all of that stuff. It was before COVID, so I think my mind was changed a little bit about my opinion in the NHS when I saw how they reacted under COVID.
Hmm.
But I wanted to do something about that. And when I investigated her, one of the main things that came out that was really, really, it was a massive red flag, was she was part of a company called Carbine 911. And the red flag was, I looked on their board of directors, and the head of the board of directors was Ehud Barak, the 10th Prime Minister of Israel, and one of Epstein's very close friends. There was Nicole Youngkerman, and then there was Pinchas Bukras, who had been the head of the Unit 8200 cyber division in Israel, and Emir Alakai and Alex Dizengov, who were both part of the Prime Minister's Office for Israeli Security. So these guys were top Israeli intelligence. And this company was funded by Peter Thiel, Jeffrey Epstein, Nicole Youngkerman, and Ehud Barak itself. And it's like an add-on to Palantir. Basically,
Hmm.
it'll use the Palantir system, and it'll be 911 or 999 in UK. It'll take over the emergency call system. You will phone 911 over in America, and a Carbine 911 operator will take the call, probably AI. It will send out some form of drone, because there'll be camera drones everywhere. They said on their website that they'll use any of the cars that are parked up nearby, or ring doorbells, or etc. They're gonna be using all of that technology to get the earliest response. So they're saying they have access to every private infrastructure of security. So if you've got any of that security, they will have access to it, and that they'll use it to make sure the response is quick. And it'll probably be a private police force that turn up as well. And will it be all Israeli? Will it be an all-Israeli board on that police
Probably.
force too, and a teal company? Because if you look over in what's happening in Germany, which I reported on with Palantir, we were already quite in America and Britain. We're already quite far advanced. They're already in the Ministry of Defense in the UK and stuff. You know, Palantir is everywhere. But in Germany, 4 federal states have got contracts with Palantir so far, and one of them has a contract that allows all the other federal states to access the Palantir database. So it essentially opens up the whole of Germany to accessing the Palantir database, and that's extremely tempting for a lot of these authorities to get access to a massive data set and a load of information, and they're going to keep doing that with people. And what they were doing was looking those solutions that I'm saying society's going to look like this in the future. They work that out through Edge organization, Edge Foundation, and other organizations, and they say, and World Economic Forum and other things, and they say the world will look like this. It will need this company, this company, this company, and then they get what's called technological evangelists to make the technology that's required to actually make that happen. So Carbine 911 was an example where they saw that if they got in there, like that's 10 to 15 years early, that they would already be able to get that niche market in the same way that Jeff Bezos became the head of Amazon in 1994, straight from working at the biggest hedge fund in the world as vice president. You know, is you get put into a position like that, and then you just you're going to make a lot of money. Nicole Youngkerman, if you follow her history, she's got a long history of being the front of very shady operations, and so it's and some not so shady operations. But I would say that every company that's attached to Nicole Youngkerman should start to worry seriously about their reputations, and some of these include like the credit card company Revolut and other companies that you should really start to think, oh, we got to get out of this, because she is so interesting that eventually there'll be movies made about her. The Epstein files showed that she had been communicating with Epstein and saying things like, we should get married, we should have babies, and they were
She was
agreeing to
saying
that.
that?
Yes. They wanted
She's a
superior
beautiful
babies.
girl. He's kind of a dork. I mean, he seems, I don't know
Yeah, but
why
it was
she has
superior
such low
babies.
self-esteem. They're
Superior.
going to have race superior babies
Yeah.
with him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
I mean, it was the whole thing is tongue in cheek at times, but that's what these people's world look like. I mean, it's not like she was born in Germany, educated at the University of Monaco. You've got to have a little bit of money to be educated in the University of Monaco. Brought up really in Spain. She has her company in London, and she is now married to Ferdinando Bracetti a count. So she's now Italian Countess Bracetti Peretti in Italy. So she's got links to all these different countries, always a high level of wealth, you know. A lot of and her by what she says, her father, and I haven't looked into it. This is very rare for me, but I haven't looked into her father. That's partially because a lot of false information was being put out on purpose and a lot of people were trying to get me to report on that false information at one time early on in the investigation, where they wanted to make me look like I was reporting erroneously. I never fell for any of that, but I could see it happening. But her father was apparently dealing with jewelry, gold, etc., so you can imagine that
is she Jewish also, or is she not Jewish?
She's surrounded by the Mossad. She's put up there on the top of the pedestal. She's a Catholic officially, because she's married into
That's easy to fake.
Her baby was baptized by a cardinal in the Vatican. I mean, I don't.
They've been doing that. They've been doing that for a while, though. But
yeah. Well, he's a Knight of Malta,
especially in Spain.
Yeah. All over the place. Italy, Spain. Listen, they've all got their little They've all got their little peccadillos, their
Roberto's.
establishment peccadillos. But in Italy, there's a lot. He's an Italian nobleman, and he's got lots of. They've all got lots of links with the same networks that have been in power for donkey's years, including the Vatican.
So going back to the technocracy, so we have the connections to the big tech with Epstein are Peter Thiel, right? We saw that in the releases. He had several email exchanges with him and introductions and things. Elon Musk. Um, who else is there in
Sean
the
Parker, that's his Parker, isn't it? The one who was what was that company that he created? Napster. Was it Napster? I
oh,
think he
Napster?
created.
Yep,
Yeah, yeah,
yep, that little kid.
and a few others. Sean Parker was like
And what
he
about
was
that guy that
involved in
wears the sun?
Teal as well in 2008 while he's attending the master class. He's actually attending it as he's part of Teal's company. So I go
How
on.
does that network work? So would, like, say Epstein recruits Thiel, would Epstein then recruit someone else and put them under Thiel, or is it more like a multi-level management, like where you recruit someone else and then you manage the person below you and then so on, kind of form like an MLM?
I don't think any of them are in the dominant position above each other. I think that there's a I think there's an academic level where in the academic institutions they've got certain programs that are mixed national intelligence programs where they recruit what I would describe as tier one organizations completely off the book, not no necessarily not it's military grade, not necessarily got a name attached to it, organizations and fundings of funding streams that allow the recruitment of these really high level operators. And I would think the same would happen with like General Michael Flynn worked for tier one military operations during between 2010 and 2012 for sure. So when
What
you're
was he doing
working
for him?
I'm not quite sure, but I would assume that it was the creation and the idea of the fifth generation warfare. You don't really know. They don't really tell you what they do at these tier one
Yeah,
military places. But in the same time, he was also given he started mentoring Stanley Pottinger's son, Matthew Pottinger, around the same time as well. And there seems to be a lot of operations
and
that coincide.
Flynn's brother still works for Palantir.
What is I mean I was on I was given a show called the Johnny Vedmore Show on TNT Radio, and at one point one of my producers like I was having people get me guests and stuff. I had producers at it, and at one point I was interviewing General Flynn's sister. I was just like, I
Oh,
don't
really?
even, I couldn't even understand how I'd got into that position where I'm talking to General Flynn's sister. Well, I think I probably do know how I got into that position in that sense.
Yeah, be careful. They can blow your car up and things like that and run it into a tree.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
luckily I don't drive.
you
So
know.
there you
Oh, there you go.
go.
And we definitely, and none
I'm
of us
safe.
drive brand new Mercedes anyway that are controlled by tech
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah. They'll give
The
me the umbrella to the neck. I'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yep. So trying to think of anyone else.
So, but
I'm thinking of all these alt-right sites that I followed for years, like Gab.com and all these other characters and these other Nazi groups that I know are all funded by Thiel. I have some of their messages that I was sent and things like that. And Andrew Torba, it's very interesting how they recruit these people. They kind of bring them in and then sheep dip them, right? Andrew Torba was kind of a lefty, went to school for philosophy. Most of his family's gay, and
didn't go to Johns Hopkins by any chance, did he, at one point? Do a
no,
little
he's not that
leadership or
smart.
management course there, like Curtis Yarvin,
No,
for instance?
he went to Thiel's house and probably got indoctrinated there. And
Well, you say indoctrinated, but I think we all know that's a euphemism.
exactly, him and Curtis Yarvin,
Yeah.
Molbug. Um,
Oh, Don't get me started on him. Don't get me started. He that was a complicated moment of my life where I revealed some of the secrets there. That was
Of Moldbug? Let's hear him. I
oh
can't stand that guy.
it was actually I was with Whitney Webb at the time. We were in a relationship together,
How's
and
Whitney? How's Whitney doing anyway? Really quick, I
well,
haven't seen
I
her on
don't
very much.
we
Up
don't
next.
we don't speak anymore. And she
Oh,
decided
okay.
to so it's complicated. We got a child together, so I mean,
Yeah, I knew that.
hopefully she'll speak to me at some point so I can know how my kid's doing. But it's complicated. Yeah, all
Yeah.
relationships are
Okay.
complicated.
Yes, they are.
But without going into detail, basically, someone, some people know this story already. Someone actually leaked the article I was going to have go out on Unlimited Hangout to Mencius Molbug himself, to Curtis Yarvin, and they had someone else put it out the day before it was due to go out, like the crux of the article, to try and stop it. It was a very disappointing moment of my life because no one should have known. Robbie Martin told this to somebody. I'm just not going to say the name, but so I told this to somebody,
Okay.
and I said, "How the hell does he know what I'm working on?" And to have sent
That's
that to you in
creepy.
the first place, and it was a tweet showing the crux of it, and it had been done the day before, and no one had known this for 20 years. Because here we go. I started looking at Curtis Yarvin years and years ago. I was really interested, and when I watch someone, I don't just have a quick observation, etc. I spend often years just watching everything they do, reading about them, reading their stuff, reading their opinions, trying to understand who they're hanging around with. And when I decided to do what I tend to do with Curtis Yarvin, which is go back in time, uh, in history, and go back to his father. And his father was an interesting character himself. He was worked in a lot of embassies in places where you could say, well, it's very likely that it could have been like spy work or intelligence or
Hmm.
something. He's in places all around the world, located. But eventually, Curtis Yarvin and his brother Norm Yarvin are a course on Earth, and Norm Yarvin is a very interesting person indeed. I researched Curtis Yarvin's rise, and I thought to myself when I was researching it, oh, that's pretty obvious. He goes to this like talented leadership sort of course at Johns Hopkins. He's obviously recruited through channels like that. They see that he's an extremely intelligent fella, and you can't take it away from him. He's an extremely intelligent fella, and then like the rest of him is made up as a mythos. But his brother, something really interesting happened. He's actually the Yale pipe bomber. I didn't expect to find that. Out of all of the different things,
That
I
makes
didn't
sense.
expect to have been able to say for the past 5 years since releasing that damned article, saying I've been able to say that Norm Yarvin, Curtis Yarvin's brother, was a Yale pipe bomber, bombing Yale in 2003, and I've never been sued. It's amazing that I can say that out
That's
loud, and
hilarious.
I can never be sued. It almost infers something. Norman Yarvin worked for DARPA. He actually, he worked on DARPA programs at Yale just before the Yale pipe bombing. He was let go. It seems like, hey, Mr. Disgruntled. Maybe not. Maybe something else. He goes away for a weekend just after the pipe bombing, and his landlord, the person who owns the house, finds the door open, calls the police because when they walk in, they find a load of pipe bomb making material out on the tables of his home. So the police come round, find all of this pipe bomb. They note it. It's in the newspapers. They talk about it. And then they don't question him. Not only do they not question him, they put what we call, and I can't remember what it's called in America. Maybe it's this what they call it in America, but a D notice, where you're not allowed to talk about it in the press. And then suddenly it disappeared. That was it. No one's going to talk about Norman Yarvin blowing up a pipe bomb in Yale University. And of course, when I released that article, that meant that Curtis Yarvin can never actually say anything to me or to my face or respond to anything I say, because I'm like, hey, Curtis, you know, when your brother, remember that when your brother was the Yale pipe bomber? And in actual fact, you go on and look at Norman Yarvin's website. He had a thing called the Yarchive at the time, and the Yarchive, during the time of just after post 9/11, we're in the Iraq War, Afghani War. You remember what it was like on TV and in the media about terrorism and terrorist units, al-Nusra Front, Al-Qaeda, all of this, you know, the weapons of mass destruction and all of that jazz. Well, Norman Yarvin has got a Yarchive website where it's not an archive, it's not on this special internet. It's out there on the clear web, and it's describing how to make homemade bombs of all type, all of the ammunition you need to do. Like it's not just a prepper's website, it's like every single detail of how to make every single explosive.
Did he hurt anybody in with these bombs, or
not with the only one that I really been able to note and I really be able to trace. And they put a do not speak order on it, of course, do not report order, whatever you call it.
Moldbug is a despicable person. Apparently his brother is too.
They're teal boys, really. They're like that. I mean, all of that is how to. I think it's kind of trying to. There's a lot of people who consider themselves either a Satanist practicing or kind of like off the grid of religion.
Right.
But basically indistinguishable from being Satanists. And he gives a new, or attempts to give a new dark ideology to those people and capture that vote. And he is just aiming to capture the vote there and twist it to be something that is suitable, I think, for the technocratic era. And it's not a surprise that he didn't go under his real name. He went under Mencius Moldbug. However, he is, however horrible he is and however horrible his ideas are at times, he is still an extremely intelligent person. He has got a savvy head on his shoulders, and a brother who was the Yale pipe bomber.
And a lot of personal issues that I've heard about, but I won't mention because they're not. But yeah, that's scary. Yeah, Peter Thiel. It's infuriating when you think about how despicable these people are and the morals and how far removed they are from that of normal people, especially like the normal ethos that were started around what, some people, founding of America at least, believed. And these guys just want to rewrite everything in their own image, like you said, which and their images are just pure evil. And how so many people on the right, like the Flynns and all these oligarchs, just partner with Peter Thiel, give him money even, partner with him on these different things, push to get Donald Trump, who's the most obvious Epstein client that's ever existed on the planet, elected, and then install J.D. Vance, some guy that's changed his name 3 times and wears eyeliner as the savior, And then Tucker,
he does look traumatized. J.D. Vance looks traumatized.
J.D. Vance, yeah, well, he is a walking trauma, and just all the people. I mean, just it's hard sometimes to understand if they're just really, really stupid and incompetent, or if it's intentional evil, right? And I have a hard time discerning it. Like, do they really think that Peter Thiel's a good guy and he's going to save conservatism and make America great again? I mean, what are they thinking? I just don't understand the thinking.
There's a point where it doesn't matter. It's going to have the same output.
Exactly.
You got to live. I mean, for me, I say this a lot. This is a sentence I actually say a lot to people. I try and describe I've had like sometimes where publicly crazy things have happened in my community. Like I've had intelligence agents clearly trying to vet me in public and stuff, and my whole community has seen certain aspects of this, you know. And I have to say to people, you have to live between a point of naivety and paranoia. You can't live on either side of those spectrums, or it'll drive you crazy. But you've got to be willing to flip between the two and explore the options of what anything could be, because these people are just like awful people who will do the worst things, and they will use the people who are closest to you, and they won't even expect it. You won't expect them to target you or to hurt you or to aim at you. Why would they do that? But these people, that's what they're doing. They're looking for good people to hurt. They're looking for ways to cause evil and to perpetuate evil, and they will do whatever. You cannot be paranoid, but you cannot be naive. If you're paranoid, you let them win. If you're naive, you let them win. So you got to be somewhere in between. See the points when you can see straight through their act and you know who they are. But then you just got to accept that these people are just like, they're playing the game, and they're over there on that side of the fence, and we're not their friends. I mean, when you're talking about Trump there, he's very media savvy, good at marketing. So by 2004, when Epstein started to be investigated properly, when Joe Ricari and others were pushing for something, he distanced himself for him. But by that point, I mean, on one of the songs I've written on one of the musicals I've done, it's called Trump Song to Epstein. I just used Trump's own words, what he's said about Epstein in 2002. And he said, you know, I've known Jeff 15 years, terrific guy. He likes beautiful women as much as I do. Some of them are on the younger side. Jeff really enjoys his social life. You know, what he said, and people say, oh, you know, that doesn't mean anything. And it's like, well, what it means is that for 15 years, while Epstein's doing the worst of his operations, the most crimes, the most criminal part of his enterprise, the most criminal part of his enterprise kind of ended in 2004 and started in about 1989. So that whole 1987 to 2005 sort of time in between there is where the worst things are going on. 1987 to, and that's exactly the time that Trump's talking about it. And what he says in it is, I know that he liked young women, and it's an open secret, really. And he loves his social life, and he's a terrific guy. He endorses him. So he already knows, but he's really good at distancing himself. And then General Flynn and others gave the right advice to Trump. It's totally the right advice. Use the Epstein case. Become the person who was the one who showed it to everybody. Release all the files. Do all of that. It really helps with fifth generation warfare, because people, they have still heavily redacted nearly all of the files they've released. I'm in the Epstein files 17 times, and it's people are reporting to the legal team that I'm reporting on the fact that they got the connections to the CIA. And in all of the emails, I'm in there 17 times, but really I should only be in there twice. And what they're repeats of the same things with slightly different things redacted. And so they're doing a lot of that. They're trying to make it look bigger, but in actual fact, they're still holding back, and they're still redacting the majority of the stuff. Because if you actually knew what was going on, you'd see that Epstein was actually helping fund all of the operations that weren't meant to exist. Whether or not you believe 9/11 was an inside job, hey, if it was, they need people to fund inside jobs, and they need those funds not to be easy to find. So the day before September 11th, on September 10th, when Giuliani or whoever it was said, hey, oh no, it was Rumsfeld. Oh, we've got like, we're missing all of this money. Yeah. Well, that money is deep state dark money that they use to run operations, and it disappears all of the time, and they just accept it. And the people who use that money, wield those funds, move it around to make the parts move actually on the chessboard of reality, is people like Epstein. There's a very small amount of people. You can't just open up some sort of checking account at a local bank to do that sort of stuff. Sometimes they had to create entire banks. Sometimes they've had to, manipulate the system in ways that means that they can move their money secretly. Sometimes they'd probably have to pay for things in houses. Sometimes they'd have to pay for it in antiques. Hence why Wexner and Taubman were heading up Sotheby's, and there's all this art going around. If you need to pay black ops to some guy over here or over there, and off the record, those happen behind the scenes in places which have their curtains closed and no cameras inside them, like Sotheby's. And so Ghislaine Maxwell's walking the floor around there claiming to look for gallerinas, but the part of the operation was happening in places like that.
It is a little overwhelming when you think about, I mean, yeah, there's very few people at the top of the pyramid probably calling the shots, but it's a pretty big network when you think about some of the operations they've done, say 9/11, and even just the Charlie Kirk thing recently was obviously something's going on there. That's a pretty big cover up. And then Oklahoma City, and so many others, and even the fake Trump assassinations, which I think were fake. It's a pretty big network. I mean, so how big of a network do you think this whole thing really is? I mean, in total.
That's where so some of this, some people will want to look, and they would have thought about this when they're creating the infrastructure for this. If we look at who we think, for instance, were involved in JFK assassination, well, we can be sure that the mafia was involved.
Johnny.
Yeah.
Can we take one quick second break? I got to grab my cord. My laptop's about to die.
Yes, go.
Hang on 1 second. All right, I'll be right back. And I'll make a quick pit stop too. I'll be right back.
That's all right. You do what you need to do, man.
Sorry, Johnny.
Just while you're away, taking a quick pit stop. This is One Nation Under Blackmail in German. Ein Nation unter Anpassung. And that's given to me by Heiko Schoening when I turned up at the trial of Bill Gates in Amsterdam recently. Just thought I'd show you that. Why not? Of course, a couple of months before going to Amsterdam for the trial of Bill Gates, I got chased around the Vatican by some of Nicole Youngkerman's associates. So there's the Pope. Yeah, we're coming for you this Christmas. It's true enough, they were.
And I'm back. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I have no problem with these things. I've done so many shows, so many.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it gets to the point where you, man, I was so nervous when I first started doing it. Yeah, maybe. I was so nervous.
I just drink a lot of water. I drink nonstop.
I would need to urinate about 5 times before I even went on like a podcast when I first started doing this stuff.
Oh, really? No,
so
I don't
worried
get nervous.
all the time.
I just drink. Like, this is like my 4th bottle of this today. And then I take a bunch of vitamins too, which don't help.
Well, I constantly drink English breakfast tea.
Oh, do you? Yeah, I'm not a
Yeah,
big
that and ginger
into
beer.
this.
That's what I'm on here. I got the Australian Bundaberg ginger beer.
Don't you feel like a traitor drinking the English tea?
No, because it's Indian tea anyway, isn't it?
That's true.
Hmm.
Which is basically English now.
Hmm.
I've been to Heathrow.
I know for my community, which has been flooded with Indian people. I love them and
Oh,
stuff,
really?
but there's a lot of them, and it doesn't seem like any of them really understand what the rules are.
Yeah, they
Which,
don't.
what can you do?
All right, so we were talking about how big this network is in the infrastructure.
Oh, good,
You
good,
know,
good. So I think that we have to realize that once upon a time we would say, for instance, in the JFK case, if we wanted to imagine who was involved in the JFK case from the evidence that we see nowadays, if we build it all up, the picture would look like the CIA were involved. Israel were definitely involved. Israel intelligence is what I mean by that. Probably like Mossad based, but also other sort of loose organizations that Israel were also linked up with, and community groups as well in America, and the mafia, of course, would be involved. And there is a certain amount of separation in an operation like that, where certain group did this and doesn't have any operational knowledge about that bit over there and who's involved and that bit over there. It looks like I tend to, in an operation like that, I tend to believe that there was more than just one other gunman on the grassy knoll or something.
yeah,
There
for
was
sure.
likely about 4. I would say they would have triangulated fire for sure. They would have their patsies set up about to be taken down, but they had at least triangulated, maybe with an extra one, because it was so important to actually take him out for them. And it is a day that changed history very much. But in an operation like that, we can say, okay, those are the parts that were around. And after that happened, after JFK assassination happened, and after they had looked more into the Bay of Pigs, and then there had been the Watergate stuff, and there had been Iran Contra and all of this, they started to learn how to stream and manage their intelligence operations in a different way. And I believe that what they've done is they've created tier one organizations that include the type of things that people like General Michael Flynn work for, that basically work in the same sort of realm as what the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence work on. They can gain access from all of the information from the CIA, NSA, or FBI. They can request whatever they want. They've got a massive amount of power, immunity, hidden behind the scenes. They're allowed to offer tier one witness protection or programs which offer a whole new life afterwards. I would say that something like the Epstein operation is a gradual operation. You'd have to think about the job on the ground. It's like if you open up a restaurant, you need a
Mm-hmm.
chef, you need
Mm-hmm.
servers, you need all of these different people who are going to make up parts of the restaurant. If you
Right.
want to manage a case like the Epstein case, well, what do you have to do? And this is a really when you start investigating this, then everything unrolls and unravels very quickly, because you can say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's look at this case and let's actually go back to the 2 points. There's 2 points really. There's a time or periods. There's a time between 2004 where a stepmother of a teenage girl calls up the cops, says, my stepdaughter got given $300 for a massage. Someone's got to do something about it. And Detective Joe Riccieri, a man of clearly of justice, went and did the thing that no one was allowed to do and got a raid on Jeffrey Epstein's place.
Mm-hmm.
And where Jeffrey Epstein gets his prison sentence. In between that time, there's about 3-4 years that passes. And during that time, they have to decide what to do. Now, with the operation generally, the amount of people who were working for that operation includes all of the people who got to groom girls, all of the people who manage the properties, all of the people who do all of that. So if you're just talking about the operation day to day, each of the
Right.
properties would probably have about 10 people working in it, where there would be probably about 2 or 3 who would have like keys to the kingdom knowledge, who would understand like the people who ran Zorro Ranch, the top two, they've been kept out of it a lot. Bryce and I can't remember what his wife's called. They've been kept out of it. Lots of people have said, "Oh, it's obvious why they're being silent," but they've been able to be kept out of it quite a lot. They would know a lot of the information. Juan Alessi, when they were doing the interrogations and they were interrogating the staff, Juan Alessi gave up massive amounts of information. If you see Epstein's little black books with the circles around certain names, it was believed that Juan Alessi was the person who was telling the ones which to circle for whatever reason that he was being asked about that information, and he was giving away quite a lot of what the operation looked like. So they wouldn't. What we can tell by his testimony and testimony from some of the victims and testimony from some of the people who were working for the scheme, that there was probably, I would say there's 10 people per place. There's probably another to do the grooming, to attract girls, paid staff to go out and find girls on the street to bring to Epstein so he can have 2 to 3 massages a day just himself before you're even into compromise operations. That would be a fleet of girls, and there would be multiple levels. So this opens up questions in itself, because at the moment, who has been prosecuted? There's Jeffrey Epstein, there's Jeffrey Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel, who didn't go get prosecuted but died in prison, and then Ghislaine Maxwell, who's been prosecuted. That's all. That we think that those operations and all of that was done by just 3 people? No way. In actual fact, all the testimony shows that nearly all of the girls that we see put on CNN or BBC, all of the Virginia Giuffres, etc., were essentially the top girls of the organizations who were going out recruiting and grooming, and then getting other girls to recruit and groom, and it was kind of like a pyramid sales scheme where they made much more money the more they got in. And people like Virginia Giuffre, while they were adults, were working really hard at that and trying to make as much money as possible, and were able to get out of the operation from the amount of money that they made. And there's a lot of evidence that there's, especially the fact that a lot of the girls got given what was called the Alford plea, the Kennedy plea. A plea that allows them to plead guilty, say exactly what they had done, that they had groomed hundreds of girls, young minors, for what Epstein wanted. I won't say it out loud. They had groomed all of those girls, and yet they're able to claim innocence publicly. That's what the Alford plea allows them to do. Publicly, it literally a contradiction to the law. They're allowed to be both guilty and innocent at the same time. They said in detail what they did, and some of the testimony is extremely damning. So if we question how many people worked for this operation, at some point very quickly we realize it wasn't the 3 that have been held to some form of account. Where's Leslie Groff? Where's Sarah Kellen? Where's all of these high up people who were involved? Why haven't they been prosecuted? Well, some of them have actually claimed from the Victim Compensation Fund. Sarah Kellen has done that. She's also claimed that she, at least that's what it seems from some of the witness testimony, where people haven't been named, but the description she gives makes you believe that it's Sarah Kellen, who's already got married, gone off. They get to ignore it all because they're not going to be tackled. This isn't a CIA operation. This isn't an FBI FBI operation that got rumbled. This is a tier 1 sex compromise operation targeting some of the biggest members in global society. This is not just an everyday thing that's been rumbled. So as soon as you think that, you can say, okay, you got how the operation worked. There's got to be maybe 100 to 200 main operators across all estates who are working at any one time on this operation, who are breaking laws, at least 100 across all. Then you've got to say, okay, but then the first case was purposely fixed, and it was set up so that he would get a sweetheart deal, only prosecuted for one charge or against one victim, when there's masses, or clearly masses of victims. To do that, to hide it all, and to be, tell Alex Acosta, you don't want to go any further. He's intelligence. To do all of that, you have to then employ both the legal teams. So there's got to be some form of evidence to that they have adopted and they have chosen the legal teams, and there is. So he gets his sweetheart deal. He's a year and a half. The last 8 months, he's on work release for 6 days out of the week, has to stay in prison all of the Sunday, but every other day he's just got to come back and sleep in prison. It's an open door. He doesn't really get punished, and it's made to look like he's somewhat punished. Then he starts getting in PR people who are going to try and rebrand him and try and get rid of this label, the P word, that gets pushed around. He doesn't like that label, so he brings in branding people, including one person from Ireland I was speaking about, who he gets involved. I can't remember what his name is, but they don't take any advice anyway, because there's no good advice for it. And there's a new operation, so now he wants all of those massages, he wants that same operation, but now he's got to do it with a gaze on him, with a focus on him, with the potential pressure on him. And at the same time, the legal teams know they've got to set up the next case themselves. They cannot let the case against Epstein then go. They've been given breathing space by the sweetheart deal, and even Epstein knows that they've got to manage that. So on the one side, Epstein's legal team is already, of course, under his control, but it's the defense team that they got to take over, that they've got to co-opt. Now, Bradley Edwards wrote a book called Relentless Pursuit. Bradley Edwards is one of Virginia Giuffre's lawyers, one of the main lawyers for the Epstein victims. His business partner, who passed at the end of 2024, was the Stanley Pottinger I mentioned earlier. Stanley Pottinger had a very interesting and central role to signing off Watergate investigation, the assassination on Martin Luther King, was involved in the Kent State Massacre, the assassination of Orlando Letelier, the standoff for Wounded Knee, I think I said, of course, was central to Iran-Contra and creating Iran-Contra. So it was an extremely important guy for the CIA in general. And he was brought in. And Bradley Edwards says in his book, Relentless Pursuit, over and over again, that when Stanley Pottinger calls him was the day Virginia Giuffre lands back in America. She's interviewed in, I think it's the end of 2012, by the FBI. For multiple times she has been over those years. And she gets back into the USA. She meets Bradley Edwards. Bradley Edwards that night at 12 o'clock gets a phone call, picks up the phone. It's Stanley Pottinger. You might not know me, but I used to work for the Department of Justice and this, that, the other. This Jeffrey Epstein case, we might be able to help you with it. Why don't you come and meet my friend, David Bowies? Now, Jeffrey Epstein, in Relentless Pursuit, Bradley Edwards admits that Stanley Pottinger admitted sharing an office with Jeffrey Epstein. And Bradley Edwards says he's a CIA. He's a Winston Wolfe of the CIA. He's sure he's a CIA. He goes to meet Stanley Pottinger and David Bowie's, but he goes to try and see if he can buy a tape recorder so he can tape the meeting because he's so sure that he's a CIA. He meets with him, and Pottinger says to him, "Yes, I did share office during the early 80s while they're both dealing with Iran-Contra with Jeffrey Epstein." And David Bowie, Bradley Edwards admits, was one of the numbers pulled out of the Epstein trash pool that was done on the first arrest, where they found a post-it note saying, "Call David back," and it had David Bowie's number on it. So obviously David Bowie's had some sort of contact with Epstein, and Stanley Pottinger had quite a bit of contact with Epstein, and they were going to be set up as the people that Bradley Edwards would get. And Bradley Edwards says in his book over and over again, CIA, 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 and then describes how he just then gets into business with Stanley Pottinger. He admits that he's a CIA. He even has this point where he's asking him, in the book, he's asking him, "You are the CIA, though, aren't you?" And he's like, "Oh, if I'm the CIA, I'm a poor man's version of the CIA." And then they both laugh because they're not sure if they're laughing because it's just funny
being
or because
coy.
it's true.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of so the actual legal team that was to defend the victims straight away co-opted by
They
members
knew.
of the CIA. Bradley Edwards gets straight into bed with Stanley Pottinger. In 2017, Stanley Pottinger's son gets brought in by General Michael Flynn, who takes him to Trump. Trump makes him Deputy National Security Advisor. An operation starts at the South Salem properties. Matthew Pottinger is in the one property. Next door is his father, Stanley Pottinger. A business registered there includes nearly all of the legal team who defend the victims, and Maria Farmer, who is going to put in a 2019 affidavit in the Virginia Giuffre case that gets Alan Dershowitz off the case. She also then she does not declare that she's being paid by the solicitors. She does not say her association with Stanley Pottinger. She does not mention that she's in an actual relationship with Stanley Pottinger at the time. And so she should obviously be impeached because she's not given most of the information. And then she's given certain slanted information to try and have Alan Dershowitz taken off the cases. That's something that's clear. So Stanley Pottinger and Bradley Edwards are working in many ways against the case and managing the case, in my opinion. What I've seen of their actions throughout it mean that a load of people benefit who were actually top girls of Epstein's organization. Many of the actual victims are not even heard. And the whole idea of who Epstein was is almost being reformed and changed. Now, my experience is personal with this as well, because I've ended up being in communication with multiple high-profile Epstein victims, and each time they've it's tried to give me fake information for me to report. And it's clear that there's an operation been going on for a long time, and it's a media operation. So how many people are involved in the operation? Well, now it's all of the different legal teams. You haven't only got Darren Indyke and Jeffrey Epstein's legal team. You've got all of the opposing legal team as well. And how many people are in, what's the chance that that's going to be exposed? Well, it's uncomfortable for everybody for it to be exposed. So they're just going to hide it. What's the point of letting it come out? So everybody's kind of in bed together. And again, it's like the party boat thing. Everybody has got something to lose. So they're all working on these things. They're all gaining from this thing, and they're all managing it. But at this point now, we're talking about all of the White House staff, all of the people who are censoring the Epstein files when they release them, all of the people who were involved in the release, all of the different departments for all the different agencies who are called in to investigate, all the different lobbying groups. It ends up being that a mass cover-up like this, little bits of it will become clear to us over and over again, and eventually we'll have a massive inquiry, and everybody then will just sweep it all under the carpet and get on, because there'll be a new scandal that's trending on the scene. I mean, this is repeated over and over again. So I don't want to sound defeatist this, but that's really what we get. Who's working on this? There's in Epstein's operation and the cover-up of Epstein's operation, thousands of people.
Right. Yeah, it's very sad the way you describe that, and it's very true. I've experienced it on a lot of other cases I've investigated. You know, people are so easy to compromise, especially legal people, especially if it's an intelligence thing where they can say, "Oh, this is intelligence. Just go with
Mhm.
us. Just say this," and they'll do it because suddenly it's a threat. They sense it. They sense, "Oh, it's dangerous. I might not. I better be on this team, on the winning team, than you know, than go against them." And they probably kid themselves with some coping and saying, well, these guys are the good guys. They're going to do something about this. They're doing something behind the scenes. They're going to get justice somehow, when of course they're not. But the end result is thousands and thousands of little kids are raped and murdered all over the world through these networks, and there's no justice brought to them. These guys just keep doing it and getting away with it, and it needs to stop.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I appreciate you, all the work you're doing to try to make that happen because it's infuriating. It's infuriating. It just makes, when I start thinking about it, then I just go into a rage and start walking around ranting to myself for hours,
I,
and
say very briefly, is that one of the things that happened that was a positive thing for my journalism is I learned first 2 days I'm investigating anything like this, I just gotta get. I feel like the worst. I think about the worst things happening to these people. I would love to see retribution galore, but then I have to numb myself to it, and afterwards it becomes a
I know.
process of just find the information, get the information, put it in a row, everything will out itself in time.
Yep. But you still have to dig in a little bit and let yourself feel it. It's a good motivator, I think, in a lot of cases to get your butt in gear. Some days when you're not feeling motivated to do something, then you think about these kids and you get mad, and then you're like, all right, let's redirect this energy into something constructive instead of just ranting to yourself, you know.
Totally.
And yeah, it's great. Anything else you can think of we should cover? Like, so the network again, just real quick. This is fascinating to me what we're talking about now as far as how large the network spreads and how it spreads and the different levels to it, and the structures that they set up. I think understanding all of that, picturing that, is really important to try to unravel all of this. So yeah, at the top you probably have, like, you have these handlers that are bringing kids in, right? The kids don't know about the other kids, obviously. The handlers probably don't even know about the other handlers, right? So there's levels to it. And then,
Levels, definitely levels.
yep. And then you have the people that are running everything, that know everything in the organization. And then most of these, like the legal experts, all they'll know about is what's presented to them in this evidence. And so that's all they feel like they have to cover up. And so they just go along with it. And, but like for a JFK, I mean, 9/11 is a big operation. There
Mhm.
must be there must be a top level people that are all knowing on the operation for the most part, or at least can unravel it
Okay.
based on what they know.
Oh,
You
this
got
is
a thousand.
brilliant. You've
You
gone
got a
this
thousand people.
direction. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something really interesting.
Hmm.
The second article I wrote in the series about Nicole Youngcomen was in August 2019. And it covered her visit with Epstein to Foxcote House in Warwickshire in England. And the Foxcote House was a country house hunting retreat that's owned by Abigail Wexner, Les Wexner's wife, and Les Wexner's obviously Epstein, one of Epstein's biggest funders. And I discovered they were meeting two senators. It took me a while to discover it, but I found someone who was there that night, and they told me what the scene looked like. And then I had to try and find who those senators were that were there, and it took me a while. But I guessed that the senators would have to be there about September the 11th, because this was in 2002. This was in September 1st, 2002. It was, the weekend of that weekend. They were there for the whole weekend. Nicole Youngcomen, Jeffrey Epstein, another woman, who I think is Melanie Walker, but I'm not sure, and 2 U.S. senators, sitting U.S. senators. So I went through all of the senators that were there. Eventually, years later, I found out the answer to this because there was 8-day tour going on. The only 2 senators who were outside the country were in Britain. They landed on that day, on the 1st of September. And they were what we're looking for as a link here. What was Jeffrey Epstein doing meeting senators? Well, it's a month before the vote, the Senate are going to vote to go to Iraq, to the Iraq War. It's almost a year anniversary after September the 11th. So obviously, we all know which direction that's moving in. We know that the people like Epstein are going to be lobbying to make sure that the Americans get involved in the Iraq war, and they want to do it on behalf of Israel pushing forward their agenda in Palestine, and that is proven by the Luntz-Wexner analysis, which was leaked the following year, showing exactly that. So this is the same operation. I mean, Wexner's given up his house, funding Epstein to a large degree, and Epstein is meeting with 2 very attractive ladies, these 2 senators, and they're not just any 2 senators. You'll be able to appreciate who these guys are because one's Bob Graham and the other's Richard Shelby, and they're the head and deputy head of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence can request any information that the CIA has, the NSA has, or the FBI has, or any other body out there. And they're basically the only people who can gain that sort of information and have that sort of access. And Epstein is meeting with those guys a month before the vote to go to Iraq. And it was very much part of the lobbying process. And the lobbying process wasn't that hard because it's probably not a lobbying process. I thought it was a lobbying process. I think it's just a conniving process. They're both going, they're all going to this country house to discuss how they're going to make it look as honest as possible and get it through whatever, they're looking to fix the event. They're not looking. They're not at this point. People want to believe that those senators are being compromised, and that idea of the fact that they're being somehow, they've got a guy behind a mirror with an old really videotape recording the senators having illicit affairs with these beautiful women in this country house in England. But that is almost fantastical when you get down to the point that these guys want to do 2 things. First of all, they want American supremacy in the region. They want to do 3 things. They want Israel to expand its borders, really. But they also but also they want to blame the Arabs. They want to make sure the Arabs are to blame. And most of the things that Bob Graham and Richard Shelby get involved in are things about the identity of Saudi Arabians who were involved in September the 11th attacks and things. That's the only nuggets of truth you're going to get from those, because they're the nuggets that they've created to look like the truth, so that that we can be pointing our frustration and anger at the Arabs rather than the Israelis or anybody else. And at the same time, Wexner's Luntz-Wexner analysis explains to do that, and that's what they should do. So what Epstein's doing there is what Wexner was sending out strategy papers about doing with one of the most famous pollsters of all time, Frank Luntz, who worked for the Democratic Party. That's an interesting way to see how they affected politics and how they were at the top tier above That's what I mean by tier one as well. It's above the
Right.
CIA, above the NSA, above the FBI. But it's important to understand something. If we go back to nearer the beginning of this conversation, and I was talking about third wave politics, destroying the left, purging the left, and taking over the leftist party. That's what happened with the Democrats. And if we watch what Epstein was doing through the 90s, especially, and in the beginning of the noughties, it was managing the Democratic Party that was the third wave party, this new centrist party. It was managing their leadership hopefuls. So a lot of the people who were coming onto the plane were people like Joe Lieberman and others who were, he ran alongside Al Gore eventually, who, of course, we know went to Epstein Island, and Bill Clinton's meeting with Epstein a lot. But I think Bill Clinton's role is really he's the CIA's puppet in the White House. And Epstein and Clinton are kind of operationally roughly at the same level at this stage, even though Clinton's president. I think operationally they're about the same level. But a lot of it was managing the Bill Richardson. He was another hopeful before he messed up in the late 90s. He was another hopeful. Of course, RFK Jr. was likely to be a hopeful for the future. There was a lot. Donald Trump was even, maybe he would flip parties again. He'd gone from like an independent to a Republican, back to a kind of independent. Maybe he would go to a Democrat again. So they were looking for leadership candidates, especially ones that were Democratic, because by this point, if they've replaced the Democratic Party with a third way party, then intelligence are in control. It's the intelligence controls a third way party, in my opinion, and they're just putting in their own leadership candidates into power. And then you look at some of the people who were involved in, like when George W. Bush and the hanging chads on the 2000 election, where that keeps Al Gore out of office, who becomes Al Gore's defense during that, but David Bowie's, who's later Epstein's victims' lawyers, linked in with these guys in all sorts of different ways. And all of these guys kind of repeat. When another example of that is if we go back in time again to 1984, when Iran-Contra is being rumbled in the press, Giuliani has a position in New York during that time, and the press ask him whether they're going to indict Stanley Pottinger. So he's the one, Giuliani, who's later involved with all of these ones, who's involved in George W. Bush's White House as well. It was already able to be in a position to protect Stanley Pottinger early on. And all of this then, it all rings the same. Intelligence took over America a long time ago. And it was really, it's JFK's assassination was the last time that there was any point where people could have hope to be free, really.
So the network seems pretty huge, like thousands and thousands of people we're talking about that are a part of this tier one, that come from FBI, CIA, police departments, all over, obviously big tech, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, all these guys are probably at that level. Who's at the top of the tier one, do you think? Who's the top of the pyramid besides Satan? Who do you think is at the top of the pyramid? Who's above?
Well,
who's the big shot caller, right? Above Elon Musk, Peter Thiel.
It's the stakeholders. I think we're living in a stakeholder society. I think it's very similar to what stakeholder capitalism looks like, but within a leadership infrastructure. And it makes sense because that's kind of like, where a lot of what Klaus Schwab's ideology has been adopted by loads of different people, especially within financial institutions, etc. And stakeholder capitalism is really where we are. the stakeholders in society are the people who got the money, and they're the same people: the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all of the big banks, all of the big financials and Mercers. All of the people who can afford these things and to fund these things are funding another society behind our back, and we're given even like the CIA, FBI, NSA, the police. All of those are they're just puppet societies made to look like there's some sort of organization that works on our behalf to protect our interests, but in actual fact is this just one top tier, and the main guys, the guys who run it, are the guys who can afford to fund it. That's as simple as it is. And they're
Do you
laughing.
think it's like, go ahead.
I was just going to say they're laughing at us. They know they
Yeah,
know that we know that the majority of us know, and they know that we can't do anything about it because really they got all of the money, and a lot of it is hidden money that we don't even realize
right.
exists and is moved around by people like Epstein or maybe Hunter Biden and people like that too.
Yeah. So it's basically like a mafia families meeting together and coming to terms and on different deals and things like that is what it sounds
Definitely
like.
mafia, yeah, mafia,
Yep.
intelligence
A
mafia.
bunch of mafia families controlling different cities coming together and hashing out their differences and making plans and
Yeah,
protecting each other and themselves.
I think that will be
Um,
something in the future. Mega cities will be owned by certain corporations.
yeah,
Those
that's for
corporations
sure.
will be owned by a certain top level.
The most frustrating thing is like some of these oligarchs, they seem like good people, like they want to do good, but it's hard to tell, like we were talking about before, if it's intent. Like the Mercers. I mean, she seems like, or they seem like they're conservatives and want to do good, and they just seem to fail every time. I don't know what it is. It's like, how do you spend $35 million on this Parlor website, right, and end up with Parlor? How do you do, all these other? How do you support Peter Thiel, right? How do you support George Bush? I mean, not George Bush, Donald Trump, and all these things. What didn't you see would happen as a result of this? You know,
It's all part of the game, and it's advice. So these people don't make decisions themselves. They go to the people who know going to make them money, and those people will say this may not be in your best interest and may not make any sense. But fifth generation warfare is where we are, and if they're going to get advice and they're making those sort of decisions, I'd say they're going to someone like General Michael Flynn.
really? I mean, I just don't
Yeah.
picture him as being all that bright, to be honest with you. I
But
just don't.
he's got a lot of control, he's got a lot of power, he's got a lot of
Really?
push. Yeah, a lot of push. I think a lot of the people who we think are really stupid, and have been painted to us as really stupid, are actually designing a world which is very stupid. It looks
Yeah,
stupid from
that's true.
the feeling of it is stupid. Everything's stupid, but they know what is to come because they're designing it, and
And you
a
don't
lot of
have to
it
be
is
smart. If you have money and power, you really don't need to be all that smart either. You can just kind of, you know, even a child with a gun could take on 3 or 4 grown men and without even trying. Um, yeah, that's frustrating. So the network is huge. We're talking at this tier 1 level, thousands of assets in order to pull off something like 9/11. There has to be at least a couple hundred people. The people that painted the stuff, the people running the airplanes, the people covering it up. I mean, it always was encouraging to me when I thought about, oh, well, they had to have George Bush's brother running security up until September 10th, right? And
Mhm.
so it must be a pretty small network. And then you realize, what about all the other actors in this thing? Maybe they didn't know what they're doing when they're painting beams. Maybe they don't know what they're doing when they're, you know, whatever they're doing. Um, but it just
Well,
seems
they bring
like
in
a huge network.
companies. They bring in companies that are private intelligence contractors, like Kroll, for instance, in 9/11. I mean, these are companies that um, no one who works for them says what they actually do. And
Mm.
so all of it is separated up, and I'm sure they probably have a giggle every now and again when they think about they've just done something that they were told to do, and then they've seen the consequences of it. But when you're involved in something like that, you don't want anybody to know that you were involved in something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, of course.
If you were involved in 9/11 and you only find out afterwards, you don't tell no one about it. You
Right.
just
That's
don't.
true.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it, like, a lot of it is the same theory that really worked in the nuclear debate, which is like mutually assured destruction. If
Right.
if a network exists and it does the worst thing in the world, then if everybody finds out about it, all parts of that network are equally culpable and are likely to be targeted.
Yep. Well, I've kept you a long time. It's probably late over there.
Yes, I think it's a
What's
bit
the
late.
time over there? We can
Oh, I
keep
don't.
going? You're still rolling?
Well,
Feeling fresh?
yeah, maybe a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit longer. It's only midnight.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Elon, I've really into tech. Like I said, I've studied all of these websites. I mean, Gab ran a complete, I mean, you can tell something's in operation and is military and intelligence behind it
Mhm.
when they don't get prosecuted for the most obvious of crimes, right? And Gab was running incredible amounts of fraud, lying about their numbers, doing public IPO, publicly raising money, right, through public funding and like issuing, stocks and things, um, and raised, I think, like a total of like $10 million or something insane. And I had proven to several law enforcement agencies that it was all lies. And a news agency, one of the somebody who was on the left side of the world, went and actually found this hosting company that was hosting Gab. It was run by three teenage, literally like 17, 18-year-old boys in England that were running this thing. And all they did is rent three servers, and it was the
Good on
largest.
them. I gotta say, at that point, I go, "Wow, well done to those boys."
Yeah, well, they were running the largest. They were running the largest lolicon distribution, drawn animated
Oh wow.
pornography in the world.
Oh no. Okay.
Also,
No. Bad boys.
take
You're
it back.
bad
Take it
boys.
back.
Take it back. You're terrible.
But Gab was hosting there, and this journalist got in there and interviewed the server admin, and he asked him how big of a server. He asked him how much Gab pays a month, and he said it was like, I think it was like $800 or $900 a month or something like that. And he's like, what are the specs on the server? And the kid told him, and he said, how many users do you think they could hold on that server on a social network? And he said, not more than like 5 or 10,000. And
Oh
he's like,
wow.
okay. And Torb is claiming to have millions of people, and he's too cheap
Yeah.
to even buy the server to cover it up. And so the whole thing is fake. And it's like you see this kid, he's obviously, there's pictures of him with Peter Thiel, right? And then he comes in, he's a leftist, kind of a broken kind of a guy. And then all of a sudden he becomes Christian, nationalist, white savior, even though his mom's not white. And 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 just starts playing the part, you know,
Mhm.
and millions of dollars. And it's the same thing with all of these right wing groups. They're all ops, it seems like.
Yeah,
And
same here
so,
in the UK. In the UK,
is it?
I see Tommy
Oh
Robinson.
yeah,
That's
Tommy
tongue in
Robinson's
cheek.
the most
It's all
annoying guy.
it's I've looked into him. I've looked into him on quite a few occasions. It's almost not worth looking into him because he's so obviously a trope. I mean, he's far right and he's pro Zionist. I mean, it's just
I
ridiculous.
know.
The whole thing is just like, oh my god, he doesn't even he couldn't even. What one thing I found interesting about Tommy Robinson is I went back in his family history and I didn't find much, but his dad has a previous relationship before he's with his mum, and it's with a Jewish lady. And I get a feeling that he's got some sort of connection, which is a Jewish
Well,
family that they don't talk about.
Tommy's real last name is Lennon.
Yeah. Yeah, Yaxley Lennon but it's not really. It's not
Lennon
really.
Oxley. Lennon
Yeah,
Oxley, I guess.
there's a whole load of things. Yaxley Lennon is
He
his
says it
first.
was through his adopted father, or something like
Yeah,
that. But
But if you go back to his father, where his father has another relationship with a Jewish lady, and I think he has a Jewish family on the side, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of interesting link with all of that, because of course we
Oh
can
yeah,
see his trajectory, and his trajectory is to be both a thug and supported in a way that Israel is. That's exactly what Israel does. They're a thug and
I know.
supported in the way Tommy Robinson is, really. But the right, there is
Yep.
no real right. It is just the pro-Zionists who
He's better than
occupy
Laura
the right.
Loomer, though. We have Laura Loomer, so it could get worse.
Oh, we get
Yeah.
we've got a few over here. We got a few over here. There's I've forgotten
Yeah.
their name, but there's a few that would make you. Well, we got Katie Hopkins.
Oh,
Officially,
she's
she would
awful. Yeah.
occupy that part. She's missing part of her brain. Yeah, they could just pump her out there, and she just say a load of crazy things, and
And
people are
what's
like,
the,
I
what's the,
like
what's the
it
blonde
because
guy?
I
What's
see
the,
her.
what's the, what's the blonde guy's name with the crazy hair that I despise more than
What you're
anybody?
talking? That's Milo, isn't it? Milo
No,
Yiannopoulos.
no, the politician in
Oh,
UK.
Boris Johnson.
Yeah, Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's another one where he's come up in interesting investigations in the past. I did an investigation about abuse at Ashdown House, this school for very, very posh boys. And he went there with his sisters. Now, his dad turned up and said when him and his sister went to this uh, school, his dad turned up and said, "Okay, the headmaster's got to stand down immediately, though." And they got rid of the guy, Billy Williamson, who had been abusing all of these boys
Oof.
at the place, and they allowed a girl in all of a sudden, which was not something they did. So they obviously had a load of power. You know, the Johnsons were obviously extremely powerful to some degree, and it seems like he was selected to be a prime minister at around that time. So that's like 1974, that he's already pre-selected as being the future leadership candidate. So how they make
Yep.
that decision, I do not know.
Yeah, he's claimed to be Jewish also. I don't know if it's true or not,
Oh,
but
he's blah, 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 blah. It's just
yeah,
a flapping mouth.
but he's dangerous. I mean, he's largely responsible for 2 million people in Ukraine being murdered because he stopped the ceasefire there, which was
Yeah.
disgraceful. And just so folks understand, the people we're talking about don't not have power. Palantir has murdered millions and millions and millions of people all over the world and have fun doing it. They're happy about it because it's practice for them and it's marketing for them. The more people they kill, the better the marketing. And they're responsible for killing those 180 plus kids in Iran recently, the very first target that they hit 3 times, 4 times. And these aren't just like evil people in the moral sexual sense. We're talking evil, evil, deep evil, like murderers. And they want to do the same thing to everybody, not just other people. It includes everybody and all of us. And
They live in a completely different reality to what we live in. They live in their own little communities. They don't come to our house parties. They go to each other's house parties, and they all agree they don't really like us. We're
well,
uncomfortable for them in many ways.
we don't like them, and there's a lot more of us than them. So I think eventually it's going to become problematic for them as well. And I
Yes.
hope. Who do you think the modern day Epsteins are? Are there any modern day Epsteins?
That's a really interesting question. I haven't properly see. There's cases all over the place
Hmm.
where they haven't broken yet. Where there's things that are happening, which people will say, "Wow, that's a really like." I think it's how you judge what an Epstein case, because the Epstein case is special in that it's all encompassing a few different areas, including intelligence, including like compromise operations, including what feels like the mafia and other things. Is so much involved in it. There's other people who also have a craving for young girls and young boys who feed that appetite maybe 2 to 3 times a day over extended periods, usually decades. In the UK, I've been reporting on one called David Sullivan, who was the head of the porn industry in the UK. Yeah, I think he's got links with the Maxwells in multiple ways as well. I found a couple of minor links with them, but I think there's more, especially with the grooming operation, because what he was doing looking for girls is roughly what Ghislaine Maxwell goes to do afterwards. And he's got influence in all different ways, but it's slightly different and it expresses slightly different, partly because Epstein was centrally about intelligence and not about his own, in a sense, personal wealth and power. He became personally wealthy and powerful on behalf of all of the intelligence operations he was doing. There's not many people who are like Epstein in that sense. So you can
Hmm.
find people over here who have like elements of his case and people over here who have elements. Like I think Hunter Biden is a very a close example of an Epstein-like character. He was a fixer working within intelligence. He has these like he has special links that allow him to get away with a lot of things and for people to cover up a lot of things. But he had extreme mental illness and a crack problem. Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a crack problem. He was very focused. So finding someone like him is very difficult when it's happening, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think I don't think there's anyone quite to his scale, but I think I see it like I said, in these right-wing influence world sphere, all of them seem like compromised souls. I
Mhm.
mean, whether you take someone like Milo, Nick Fuentes, like we talked about, is obviously incredibly compromised. Obviously, the guys who ran the January 6th operation were Ali Alexander, who's, like we said, had been prosecuted 3 times now, I think, for child crimes against young boys, and I drove him off the internet. And um, and then even these other ones like Benny Johnson, right? There's been a ton of accusations against him from young boys. I mean, he's happily married with kids, but there's still a lot of accusations with young boys. And so I think a lot of these guys are compromised. And the oligarchs that hire them and pay them know that, probably have the information on them so they can use them as tools. There's another half a dozen or so that I could think of.
There's
Um,
also I mean, that idea, I'd like people to explore that idea a little bit more because I think we do, and I tended to do this as well, simplify that idea, the idea that they know information about them, ergo, it's maybe implicit, or maybe it's like a suggested, or maybe it's said straight that they should be careful and stay in line because they know they have that information over them. There has to be a point where someone actually uses that. In reality, the majority of these people are driven forward by the idea of gaining more wealth. So they don't care what people could use against them or not. They just want to make some money off it. So they're just looking for the money. If people were to say to them, I'm going to use this against you if you don't do what we said, they'd be like, yeah, but can you just pay me some money, please? And I'll do it, whatever. So at the
right.
end of the day, they just want, they're looking for people who are just greedy. And those sort of moral and ethical concerns that we have don't exist in those people, the people who are chosen's, uh, uh,
I
like,
think you still have to have some
archetype.
control over them, and they don't want people that are sincere. They want people that are broken morally because they're easier to control. They don't want someone that's independent and strong. They want someone that's confused and broken.
You give a
And
broken person a load of money, and they spend that money in 2 seconds and come back for more money. So, I
right.
mean, there's so
And
many
these
ways to keep these. If you've got, and this is again what people
That's
like
true.
Epstein were doing is they were funding these sort of people. Teal, maybe Teal is a good example of an Epstein type person,
Right.
and he's like, for maybe we could even say Musk is, because I think it
Right.
looks like Musk was selected probably through some form of Microsoft leadership program post 1994, 1995, 1996 time. Put into a few roles where it fell apart, but then basically given keys to the kingdom alongside Peter Thiel with PayPal. And X essentially as well, because they both wanted to create X very early on. So these guys could possibly be considered,
Yeah,
but
Teal. Yeah, Teal could definitely, I think you're right, could definitely be considered
we're going to discover things
similar.
afterwards that'll make us feel sick about him. And there's going to be a load of criminal stuff that we're going to say, oh my God, who are these people and how did they get away with it for so long? This is a repeated fact of life for all of us.
Yeah.
So I mean, a load of these guys don't only smell bad and look bad, but they're clearly doing stuff. I mean, Teal's relationships openly, what we know about them, are worrying at best, very
Yep.
worrying and very concerning. So once you see behind and again, that's another thing. If that's normalcy for you, then if you get people who are like that, they all compromise each other in some way. And this is
Well,
very
the thing
much like
is,
mutually
it's
assured
hard,
destruction.
but it's hard if you're doing it from, if you're if you're on the left of things and you're gay, it's not such a big deal. But if you're a Christian nationalist trying to be hard right Nazi, it's a little hard of a sales pitch when you're openly gay, right? That's why Peter Thiel got so upset when he got outed for being gay by that magazine. Can't remember the name of it.
Yeah. Gorka.
Um, yeah, Gawker. Yeah, right. And and then he secretly ran a lawsuit against him with Hulk Hogan. You know,
That's ridiculous. It was
it
again
is.
that kind of yeah. Go on. Sorry though.
And so all of these folks on the right, I think, and like we said before, it's not real. The internet's fake, people, in case you don't know that. The internet's all fake. The numbers, everything's fake, everything's artificial. And they have literally thousands and thousands of bots that can pump anybody and squelch anybody that they want. And they have obviously tens of thousands of bot accounts that also have attached real credit cards to them. So they can even go in and support people in chats and write chats and all kinds of stuff, right? And so it can look very real. And these people can even be supported um, secretly with these
Hmm.
bots and these artificial payments. So I've talked about that for years, but they all seem to have the same traits, right? These Christian right wing Christian nationalist types um, are all gay. And it's a hard that's and they're married. And so I think a lot of them that's would be a lot or at least some motivation for them to go along
Ev-
with things. And they're already and a lot of them are probably faking it. Like I don't think Candace Owens is sincere in her pitches. I don't think she's honest in her
no,
in her
no.
takes, and
No,
so
they're very good. They're very good at trying to find thing that is trending. That I mean, it's not. She's not even very good at it. It comes across fake when she's doing it. But there might be something. I mean, it'd be too much of a generalization to even work out, and I might be slayed in some circles for saying it. But maybe the right wing engage just doesn't work. Maybe gay is always the left thing.
I'm
Just
sorry, but
saying.
it is. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys.
Is that was maybe
I mean, the whole right
otherwise
wing
you
right
get
now
Peter
is this.
Thiel.
Right. Yeah, Peter Thiel, who was upset he got outed for it.
Yeah.
It is true. I mean, that's just the way it is. And these guys all try to make themselves trad right wing, and the girls do the same thing. And a lot of them have a lot of skeletons, and problems in their closets. And
Mm.
they all get like Lauren Southern and lots of these other ones, and they all just, make a lot of money, like you said, and then eventually get the rug pulled on them. Um,
There is. I mean, a lot of this is a lot of all crime and all of these issues. A lot of it is all to do with pent up sexual angst of some type. Heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, ubersexual, asexual. It make no difference. It's all it's a lot of why people commit the worst crimes or get involved in things like this are also because they've got a love of changing the world, and they want to change the world for something that they believe they need. And a lot of these guys seem to need younger, uh, the young people for all sorts of reasons, terrible reasons. They just
Yep.
they
And
want to
boys,
change
I think,
laws.
you
They
know,
want to change society. They do it in their own lives, and it's clear what they want. So that's obviously an agenda that no one could talk about publicly, but exists. And obviously a lot sometimes in history, every now and again, like in the 70s, late 70s, a politician in the UK, Harriet Harman, when she worked for another organization, she said some sentences that repeated years later to show that she was like into that stuff. And I think every now and again someone like pulls back their mask and shows it, and people don't, they think it's just one or two. And
mhm.
again, that's something where we talk about pumped up numbers to become famous. I think the actual amount of people who want to change that is much more. I deal with a lot of people on the street. So I go out on the streets of Cardiff and I do a lot of filming and I meet a lot of people. And sometimes I meet people who ain't so nice. And I met one person recently who's very confusing. He's obviously got mental health problems, addiction, he's an alcoholic and the like, and he's going up, I first seen him going up to like teenage girls and he's saying stuff to them, making them obviously uncomfortable. He keeps trying to touch them and stuff. So I started recording him and talking to him and telling him to leave the girls alone and stuff. But there's obviously a load of people then who had a go at me for doing that, for trying to stop him from bothering girls out in the street. He's got blood all over his arm. He's sweat. He covered in like drink that he spilled over himself. He's going up to 13-year-old girls. Yeah, loads of the people who are watching are like, they're like, "Oh, leave him alone. Just leave him be." And even there was no one actually. When I was there, I'm in the centre of Cardiff city centre, and nobody was actually stopping and had seemingly had any moral concerns. They're just leaving it happen. And
Really?
since I've seen him just yesterday, a second time, same guy. He got arrested on this occasion. I called the cops. They come round. He tried to hide out in one of the shops a little bit, but they found him, and then they made the decision themselves to arrest him because of the state he was in. And this time, I decided, okay, I'm not going to instantly just like show myself to him. I'm going to follow him around a bit. I'm going to gather a little bit of evidence, see what he does, see if he's as bad as I think he is. And he's a complicated character because he walks through the street, he's talking to homeless people here and there, but he's not saying anything that you can understand. He's basically grunting most of the time. But then it got to a point where he sat down next to this girl and he's trying to talk to her and she's not talking to him. And then he tries to grab her and she gets up and like gets away really quickly. And there's other moments like that. And people, just the whole of society, they're walking on by. They're not
Is he
seeing it.
is he a local or is he an immigrant? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
why
yeah. Oh,
people are
no, no,
afraid to
no.
say anything?
He's Welsh. I would say he's Welsh.
Okay.
I would say that there's a load of conversations that aren't asked. And when I've talked to a couple of police on occasions about things like this, and they've said, I can't even, like, the different police have said, can't even explain how bad a problem this is. It's just everywhere. And
What, people acting like that? Or just not reporting or people turning their
not
heads?
only people who think they have a right to say touch girls or touch women, not only people who think that, and people who think that's right for them to do it, and people who are doing it themselves, but people who are attracted to very young girls, very
Mm.
young boys. Those people exist all around us and don't say anything at all. And it's in numbers that are much more than just one or two people think they are, like the way you have this idea where it's just, oh, it's only a couple of people here and there. The number is much more, much bigger, the problem is much more serious. And the authorities know this, and I think the problem's purposefully inflated so that there can be more control over data, there can be more control over other things, because I think that's it's a really easy way for people like Peter Thiel to sell the idea of them able to protect everybody by having all of the data and
Mm.
analyzing it to find people like that at some point, but it won't be used like that. And to be perfectly honest, I think that the amount of people will surprise everybody. I
Right.
think
Yeah, I think.
I there's one thing that I can tell you statistically remains true, that a prolific offender of a prolific offender will in their lifetime have between 100 to 150 child victims
Mm.
if they're a prolific offender. Of those child victims, between 10 to 15% will become offenders themselves.
Mm.
So you work out
The math, that's
there's an
exponential.
exponential
Right.
growth, and there's a messed up society we're dealing with, and no one can really talk about how messed up it is. No one can really talk about their trauma. No one can really get through it all without someone using it and using them and controlling them by using their trauma.
Mhm.
And that's what's happening in the Epstein case. That's what's happening in intelligence operations. They're often intelligence operations, like in the MK Ultra field, would create the trauma and then give the options that
Right.
come after that trauma, and then the person gets to decide, are they going to be do this, or are they going to do that, and they end up following these lines
Mhm.
that are given to them. Now, a lot
Given.
of this
Right.
again is about choice architecture as well, which is what they talk
Mhm.
about in a lot of the behavioral insight courses at Edge. What Richard Thaler tells Elon Musk and others is that they are the choice architects. They are the ones who are going to decide the decisions that are going to be given to people, and then people are going to decide A or B. Now, that means you control their society, you control their will, you control which direction, because you create both the questions. And our
Mhm.
society is totally built like
A or
that.
B.
So
A or
they're
B, A or B, A or
yeah,
B. I always pick C.
they'll
The,
create that. I agree, but they'll create a world where everybody will walk towards the worst things in society. I when I see the guy who I'm talking about, I've discovered his name's Matthew. He's extremely complicated. He's obviously got a lot of mental health issues. But my first question was, how do you solve somebody like that within society? But I think a lot of people, the only reason Matthew shows his true face is because he's got a drug addiction and
right.
addiction to drink. If we knew the true extent of things, then we would have a massive wake up call within our society, and there would be a lot of talk about how to stop these traumatic events in the future.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, going back to who the new Epsteins are, and then I'll talk about that. I think you're right. I think there probably aren't to the same level as him, but they probably don't need it now with the technocracy and the technology, because people are basically their own Epsteins, just
Mhm.
in using the internet, and they probably have all that data on people. There's probably hundreds of thousands of people doing stuff that Epstein could have never caught doing stuff, and they have the evidence of them. They have their cameras turned on, they have their browser history, they have their text messages with these people and things like that. So they have lots of compromise on a lot of different people. And I
100%.
mean, you can think of, like most of the hackers online are were compromised from looking at material online, right? And I've known several guys that killed themselves that posted online that they couldn't take it anymore. They were being used in these operations. And, you know, a lot of, people like Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes, all these other guys obviously have a lot of personal issues. And so I'm sure they're so compromised, not just in the real world, but online also. I
Hmm.
mean, you know, but as far as the cure goes, I'm a fundamentalist Christian. So of course I have to say you have to be born again, is the only way. And, but I've seen that myself. It does, obviously, it's very important, I think, for everybody to have that forgiveness in this world and the next. And it is important to have that black and white world to live in, you know. But people are still left with trauma. Just because you get saved doesn't mean you still don't have scars from your past life that carry on, you know. And it's a battle. Each person's going to have to fight whatever those traumas were that they went through. But it wasn't an accident that those things happened. God obviously let those things happen, and He has a good that can be, from those bad experiences. He has a good that can come from it, you know, like the trauma you went through. If you didn't go through that, then maybe you would have ended up in a much worse situation. Maybe you would
Hmm.
not have become the man you are. Things could be worse than where they are now. And a lot of
Yeah,
people, forget that.
I do.
My life,
I
life
I
wasn't great
consider
either.
it. I consider it as the like in relation to my own. I consider why I can see direct correlation between what I do now and the trauma I suffered when I was young, and that it has to be a continuous. It has to be a continuous presence of me doing something in my life that means I feel like I'm fighting against that person who I can never really fight against, who's probably dead now. I've actually recently requested all of the case information and the
Good.
videotapes of myself from the police and actually look at what the situation was and what they did at the time. And really, like a lot of what you discover in life is that these guys, maybe what we're talking about, where you say these guys they suffer trauma and they express differently afterwards. You've got to be strong enough to tackle all your own trauma. You've got to be
Exactly.
strong enough to look at the previous you and say I'm sorry to the previous you, because it's nearly always yourself you got to apologize for the worrying and all of that someone else put upon you. And then you just like we all feel like we all there's not someone to say sorry to everybody. Sometimes you've got to be the one to say sorry to yourself for just
Hmm.
circumstance, just for life, just for how it played out, you know.
Yep. It's brutal. It's not an easy world, especially for good people. And the bad people just take the copes after cope after cope after cope and take whatever's easiest for them and end up becoming just as evil or more evil than the people that traumatize them. But that'll
Hmm.
be good if you get those records and take a look at it
Yeah, I
and
think it'll be
kind of
a new
process it.
look, a new
Yeah,
look in my own life, and yeah, a new look inside what actually happened. I think I know some I know the whole like my story. I know the events that I saw, and I know there's a load of things that were never discussed and never talked about. There was things that happened in it which made me think there must be more than just me and this other kid. There must be more. He looked like he did. He was when about 2 years after his conviction that I was involved in. My sister would see him almost every day standing outside the toilets in Asda's supermarket waiting to go in the toilets, and they just couldn't, like someone like that who's just constantly trying to target it, no one's even looking. So if they're
they
constantly trying to
probably
target the amount of offenses probably sits in what I was saying, 100 to
I was
150
gonna say,
different offenses during that time.
he got off probably dozens of time and people
Yeah.
made excuses for him and just turned their back on it because they don't wanna deal with it
And
dozens
when
of
you
time
talk
before he
about it,
ever
other
hits you.
people talk about it. Everybody shares a bit of their trauma, and things
Yep.
change. There was a guy, Andrew Woodward, I think his name is, who talked about being abused by a guy called Barry Bennell while he was at the youth team of Manchester City Football Club in the UK. And him waiving his anonymity and actually having a discussion about it meant that by the end of it, there was something like 189 different victims discovered, 189 perpetrators, about 800 different victims, a load of different circumstances, all coming out in a load of different clubs all around the country. So people really just, as soon as, this is why they pay hush money in these
Mhm.
affairs,
Mhm.
because as soon as one person tells their story, everybody else tells their story soon afterwards. And sometimes you have to
It
be,
snowballs. Right,
yeah,
you gotta get out in front.
gotta be. Yeah, and that's the only way it can be as well. You get, the fact is that if people ain't gonna talk about it, it takes one person to break that. And that's why I kind
Right.
of try and do in my work with my articles. I try and report on things that no one else can, will, or want to report on. One of those things, not
And you'll
everybody
never
has the same reason.
even know all the kids you helped. Somebody would have cut that guy off years before, it would have
Yeah,
helped you, you know?
I know.
And so hopefully we can cut some of these people. That's why I like dealing with modern day things and going after them in more real
Yeah.
world ways. The people I've had that weren't very good to me, um, I mostly got back, to be honest. I'm a Christian, I should forgive, but I still forgive them for my own sake, but I make sure they can't do any more harm to
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
else,
yeah.
because it's hard to bring justice. But if someone doesn't repent, my attitude is if someone does something wrong and they repent and they're truly sorry for it, then I let it go. But if they don't, then I make sure they don't do it again. It's
Yeah.
kind of how I roll on that. But all right, man, it's been great talking with you. I really appreciate your time. That was a great call. And again, I appreciate all the work you're doing on behalf of humanity, especially the kids.
Thank you.
Where can people go? I should have said this at the beginning. I'll put it in the notes anyway at the bottom. Where can people go to support your work and find you online and things like that?
You can definitely find me on newspace.com, which has, of course, links throughout it. Loads of articles, loads of rabbit holes to get lost in. I've been writing for a long time, and a lot of my work is stuff that you won't find mentioned anywhere else or talked about anywhere else. But you can go to just simple things like YouTube, and you'll find me there. I've done something that seemed impossible, and I've put my musical talents to work to make the Jeffrey Epstein podcast, the musical parts 1 and 2, and they are very, very good and extremely catchy.
That's hilarious.
People don't quite understand what I'm doing with it all of, straight away, but it allows me to explain a complex situation in 3.5 minutes in a song that it would take
Hmm.
maybe 4, 5, 7,500 word articles to get through. So I mean, it's a really powerful medium song. So you can, whatever you like, whether you like to watch things, whether you like to listen to things, whether you like to read things, I've tried to make a range of media so that you can indulge in whatever platform as easily as possible. And please, if you want to support my work, of course, like and subscribe. You can buy me a coffee, become a patron or on Substack. But I appreciate all my guys. I'm trying my best to take the right next step. But like I said earlier, I believe there's something much bigger than me that is just, and it's been this way, that just shows me which is the path that will continue for me to be on the right path and do the right thing. And every time I finish one thing, one investigation, the next thing shows itself, and it's very clear what I should be doing. And I keep following that path, and I can only do that with people's help. So thank you to everybody for even if you give me a like or something.
Thank you, Johnny. Stay on with me for a second. I'm gonna after I end the recording, we can keep chatting for a second.
Okay.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm Derek Peterson from Providence Post. Bye bye.